And then you had cutscenes like the CGI cutscenes in Dragon Warrior 7, which were like nightmare fuel.
You know what? Am I going to have to bust out my castanets here?
Oh man.
CBM here from the nuclear heat wave, and I've got my dear buddy Rudy's here with us, and we are ready to talk Quintet today. How are you, sir?
I am excellent. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there with malfunctioning ozone generators and just everything's just going haywire. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Same here. I haven't actually, seen you on camera in a long time. I've been down here in New Mexico for so long that I haven't seen people up in Michigan very much, and it's been very I don't know, isolating, I guess.
It is. Well, and right now I'm in Indiana, but even when I was living there,
you're back and forth, so
I'm back and forth. It's the transient nature of things.
Yes.
And I guess that's where we're ready to kick it off with Soul Blazer.
I guess so, because Quintet is one of those companies that had all this weird kind of transiency of life and mysticism elements to their storytelling, and like just crazy stuff in these games.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable how well, and to start off though, I will say that as we're talking about Quintet's four most famous games, which they comprise Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, Illusion of Time, Across the Pond, TERRANIGMA, and Granstream Saga.
And we can mention ActRaiser 1 and 2 as well. It's also worth noting that Soul Blazer was called Soul Blader in Japan. So the naming chicanery is something that happened a lot through these games.
Oh, it certainly did. And the ActRaiser series, and we will kind of touch base on that, but I'll let I would like you to tell me about your experiences growing up. Now we got to go back,
of course,
to 1992.
Right.
We all know what was going on. Bad fashion, decent, good music.
Sometimes, we remember some of it.
But we remember Soul Blazer. So
absolutely.
So your thoughts? I remember playing that game. I couldn't get enough of it. It is a
really satisfying kind of. It's almost like a Legend of Zelda clone in some ways, but with a little bit more gameplay to it and a lot more story. It's one of those games that I picked up for the Super Nintendo and just loved the hell out of it. It's got this very strange like atmosphere that is something that I can't really find in any other games, even up to this point, where there seem to be like religious elements to it, almost, where like there's some kind of Shinto influence, there's some kind of Christian influence. There's this kind of atmosphere of mysticism throughout the whole game that turns it from a very straightforward adventure where run into dungeons, slash monsters, go to next level kind of thing, into something that's actually kind of an interesting experience. And then, of course, as we're going to get to eventually, it leads to some even more wild experiences in the later games in the series.
Most certainly. So let's go to the plot. And it's, if you don't read the prologue to the game,
right,
you actually miss out a lot of, what the game's based upon.
Yeah.
And so, well, I never read the prologue, so I had no idea that King Magritte
yes,
was interested in contacting Deathtoll, which in later games you could almost liken Deathtoll to Dark Gaia.
Right.
But that King Magritte was interested in getting 1 gold piece for every soul that was captured and sent to Deathtoll.
Right.
And playing through it all this time, I honestly didn't know. I knew that the Queen Magrid was evil, and that the Queen sent her husband, the king, to jail.
Right.
Just so she could get more, and that was 1 more gold piece for her.
Right.
But I had no idea about this until playing it through 2 days ago, and I'm just thinking, 1992, 2026. I mean, 30 or 2026. I'm already skipping ahead.
Yeah.
And I'm bleating like the goats that are common in the Quintet games. The
Turbo, right? No, Turbo's the dog.
Turbo's a dog, except we're fast forwarding to the we're fast forwarding to the ending here, where the angel right eventually falls in love with Dr. Leo's daughter, Lisa.
Right.
And then after a year of saving the world, he desires to reconnect with Lisa. Well, that means that the angel now must become temporal. That now he must become human, and then the master, which we will say is God, grants him, the angel, that wish. And so they send him down to Lisa, wiped his memory clean.
Yep.
Well, Lisa has this goat, and she named the goat Turbo.
Yep.
In reverence of the dog Turbo.
Yep.
Who was Dr. Leo's, and then we will get to it in the other games where Turbo makes an appearance. Absolutely. We're already
all over the place.
Nuts, honestly.
I mean, like this is one of the things that this game does to you. Like, it has this, like, people don't realize that back in the day, like, if you put in 3 or 4 more words into a game, you were losing a sprite, right? Because all of the storage was at such a huge premium for all these consoles. You had a console where they were talking about a game that was 8 megabits, right? But 8 megabits is just 1 megabyte. And each character is 1 byte. So every time you add another character to this story, you're basically taking away 1 more byte, and 8 bytes turns into a sprite. And every time you put in 8 more bytes, you got to pull 1 more sprite out of the game. And so people were at this very strange position where they had to actually be careful about how much text they put into the game. You could easily go over your limit and be like, oh, we got to cut a bunch of stuff. And so, like, the fact that they managed, with the limited amount of text they were able to put in the game, to create a story that was as unique and interesting as the story that runs through these games is really an accomplishment that I think people need to, or people don't appreciate enough, I guess.
People today don't appreciate it. They don't understand the economy of language that translators especially had to employ.
Yeah. And people also nowadays have the new Call of Duty, which is 300 gigabytes or something like that. Data is no problem whatsoever. So
it's unbelievable now.
Absolutely. It's people had to worry about putting 1 more word of text in there. And nowadays, oh no, everything's voiced, it's all, super high quality, lossless audio and all that stuff. And here we were back in 1992 with, meaty and 8 megabits.
And 8 megabits. And then you ended up going to something like Final Fantasy IV with You Spoony Bard.
Yep.
Translations like that to save space. Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, Final Fantasy VI was translated by Ted Woolsey in, I think, 90 days. And, that game has a lot of text in it. And so that must have just, I mean, he did cut some corners and he did make some mistakes. But, just the feat of doing that in 90 days,
it's incredible.
And it's a pretty incredible feat, honestly.
It really is. And then as we're talking about these, we can kind of go back and forth and
Yeah, of
illustrate parallels with
Well, like
future games
the
in the
first
series.
the first parallel, right, is the one that we get by comparing Soul Blazer to the different but similar aesthetic of ActRaiser, right? ActRaiser came out first, and you kind of play as like an angel, basically. And
Yeah.
but it's a very simple game. It's kind of a side-scrolling hack and slash mixed with like a town builder, a very basic town builder. And so like that game kind of had like a Greek gods mixed, kind of mishmashed with like Christian theology kind of aesthetic to it. Whereas Soul Blazer and the rest of the series kind of ditches the Greek gods, the Greek pantheon kind of feel, and goes for like a weird hybrid like Christian Shinto thing, which I think was really unique. Like nobody has done this ever. And like it's the kind of thing where only because number one, ENIX was able to print money with Dragon Quest, and number two, ENIX was able to fund people at Quintet to kind of, put the time in to do something very unique, as opposed to, just doing the same thing over and over and over again and hoping for, and just hoping to keep making money off the same train. They really were experimental with this kind of stuff. Yeah, and it wasn't all sunshine and roses either. We had a bunch of kind of bad games that came out of ENIX at the same time, or I guess ENIX at the same time, like E.V.O. The Search for Eden, which, while it still has some of that mystical spiritual feel to it, the gameplay is terrible. The game design is terrible.
Trash.
It is one of the worst. It is one of the games that is so bad that even though I want to like it for what it's trying to do, I just can't.
But then you notice there is a preoccupation, though, as we see in all of the Quintet games, about evolution,
Yes.
about technological advancement and its place in society, how humanity deals with said technological advancements. And these are common throughout, especially from Soul Blazer on.
Yeah, I mean, just, ideas of like, you have to remember that back in these days, Nintendo was also like a horrible censorship regime too, right? Like they would take stars and crosses out of Dragon Quest and replace them with like onks and stuff like that. Like it was ridiculous the amount of censorship they would commit on these poor games that hardly did anything wrong, right? They got rid of coffins and turned people into little rotund ghosts in Dragon Quest 3 instead, right?
They did,
yeah. Lots of stuff like that. And so like the fact that these games were produced and were released, generally speaking, except for TERRANIGMA, which never made it to the US, but it did make it to Europe, right? But the fact that these games were released by Nintendo of America without massive censorship is like, I've likened it to a miracle. Like the fact that these games are about like God, and the fact that they got through Nintendo of America is like its own kind of weird miracle, honestly. And it's one of those things where it's like, I can't believe they had the nerve to let the game that talks about X, Y, and Z get through and head over to 9-year-old, 10-year-old me. Or it's like, oh yeah, this game has slavery in it. This game has cannibalism implications in it. Crazy stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna give this to a 9-year-old. It's like, okay, fine. But like at the same time, the fact that it made it to me is like one of the things that I remember most in my like childhood video game experiences. Is these two games in particular, the Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia. I didn't play TERRANIGMA until much later because it was only released in Europe.
Right. The English version was only released in Europe, and yikes. But I will say this though, with Soul Blazer, reincarnation, and it's not just the souls that you save. You'll save a tree stump in Greenwood, let's say. Yeah. And that tree stump will talk about how he wishes he wants to be a bird in his next life.
Right. Yeah. Like that kind of stuff does not make it into games in the 1990s. Like no. we don't have deep considered thoughts about reincarnation in games in 1993 and 1994. We have Super Mario World, and and to a similar degree, we have like Final Fantasy IV, which had a great story, but wasn't telling anything, wasn't delving into any like deep philosophical ideas.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't inviting the player to consider deep philosophical questions.
Yeah,
it was not. It was clear who was good and evil. Well,
pretty much. I mean, there were some twists in Final Fantasy IV about who was good and evil, but we won't spoil that game for people who still haven't played it. But that was a long time ago.
If you haven't, oh my
God, yeah. If you haven't played
Final Fantasy IV,
go for it. It is
amazing. You need to.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. Too. It's not like a lot of the Final Fantasies that are like 40 hours or 50 hours or 60 hours. Final Fantasy II first playthrough is probably going to be under 20 hours. Especially if you're playing the American version, which was designed in a way to be a little bit easier and to avoid the need to grind, which grinding was a big thing in RPGs before Final Fantasy IV. But I still remember, seeing advertisements for FF4 called FF2 in like Nintendo Power, and they're like, the first RPG where you don't have to grind. And I'm like, I don't have to grind? Oh my God, I need this game.
So here's the one thing about that, and then we can get back to the quote, is nowadays people won't encounter the original Final Fantasy 2/4 on Super Nintendo, that they're likely to encounter the either Game Boy Advance remake, PlayStation remake, or the Wii Virtual Console, or a Switch,
or the Pixel remaster,
or the Pixel remaster. And the difficulty, they adapted it more to the original Japanese, and then worked backward and may have made it.
My understanding is that the Pixel remaster, which is kind of the biggest thing that Final Fantasy 1 through 6 did in the last 10 years or so, is that those games are actually all a little bit easier than they were in their original incarnations. Like Final Fantasy 2 is like actual 2, like the NES one. The Pixel remaster version of Final Fantasy 2 is basically a cakewalk, and that was not true of the NES version. Oh no! Yeah. I see the look on your face, and you're like, oh my God, that game was.
There are times in that game where you stray just a little far, and you will get slaughtered.
One shot.
You will get slaughtered.
Yeah, it's crazy, and so they made it a lot easier.
Then you're hitting yourself to try. I need to get my weapon level up. I need to hit myself.
Right.
Stuff like that, but
all kinds of bizarre ideas that you had to do in that game to progress because of its weird progression system. Anyway,
which they fixed with the Saga games though on the Game Boy.
Yeah.
To some degree, but anyhow, so Deathtoll, when you face him, at the end of Soul Blazer, these games often have particular quotes that more or less define the game. More or less define philosophical question, outlines the main one. And here, Deathtoll is exhorting to the angel. He says, some people believe being constantly reincarnated means everlasting suffering. And so Deathtoll himself believes that, well, humanity that's constantly being reincarnated in this circle of life is suffering. And so it's Deathtoll's goal to end that suffering and to kill you.
Well, it's not even that. Because like, if I remember correctly, it wasn't necessarily that all these souls went to Deathtoll. It's that the master sealed them up himself, a lot of them as well, right? And so by Deathtoll creating this threat, right? Deathtoll basically tricked the master or God into sealing these souls up and then ending the circle of life to a certain degree as well. So, like, there's a lot going on there from a philosophical perspective that you just don't. It's just like, oh, like you play the game when you're 9 and you're like, this is fun, and then you play the game when you're 20 and you're like, oh, whoa, this is saying something.
And that the select few that Deathtoll keeps around.
Yeah.
those will become everlasting. Now they'll be now in Soul Blazer, they will be demons. In the other games, as we'll get to, zombies and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's the dark element that wants to try to achieve immortality, and then it's the light element that wants to stop that.
Right.
Notion. So I would say last on Soul Blazer, I enjoyed I enjoyed it tremendously over a period of years.
It is so good. Like, you think about it like from a mechanical perspective, and you're like, oh, it's basically Legend of Zelda. But then when you actually sit down and play it, like the differences are so stark and so interesting that you're like, oh, this is way more interesting than any Legend of Zelda game, at least around that time.
Well, and it also predated. So it predated Zelda by a few months.
Link to the Past, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it did predate that,
Sure.
And it's
but like I'm thinking more like the original Legend of Zelda, top down sword fighting. One button for sword, other button for item. In Soul Blazer, you have one button for sword, other button for magic spell. It's a pretty similar, from a mechanical perspective, it's kind of the same thing, right?
It's a simple game, yeah, but
there are also some negatives about like Soul Blazer's mechanics as well, such as the enemies all spawn out of these little soul generator things. And so it's very easy to just farm those and clear them out. Sometimes, as long as you kind of know what patterns things have, you can sort of just hold your sword out straight and just like completely slaughter everything as it walks out of the portal. It's pretty funny sometimes, honestly.
You can. But I think the game was not meant to be ultra challenging either. I think the game is meant to be to where you will level up, and then the theory is you won't have to do much grinding.
Well, you kind of can't, honestly, because once you clear out the monster generators, they vanish and they're gone. So the game had to be designed so that through the course of the game you got enough levels that you could beat it. And then if you really wanted to, you could grind some levels. The easiest way to grind levels in that game that I know of is to grind the snowballs in the fourth level. But that's a thing that you can do, because those snowballs drop a lot of experience points for whatever reason.
Those have to look. Okay, those have to be the most irritating.
Yes.
And I mean, we're going through all the Quintet games. I'm telling you, those snowballs, they pissed me off. They're
PTSD generators for sure. Because you walk up to them and they're just a tiny little thing on the screen. And you're like, oh, that's adorable. And then you get one pixel too close, and suddenly, whoosh! It becomes this giant thing that's like
that's chasing you around.
Yeah, a third of the screen, and it's chasing you around, and it does crazy damage, and you have to go back home and come back out again to fight more, and they respawn. So. Fun times.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that oh my goodness. So Soul Blazer was released in America. January of '92.
Okay.
To give some time frame. Well,
yeah. So this is early in the Super Nintendo's run, basically.
Yes, and
before a lot of the classics.
A lot of the classics, and we will get to, as we talk to TERRANIGMA, maybe some of the reasons why Nintendo of America, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But what's the next in the series?
Let's stop one more second. I just want to mention one more thing about Soul Blazer before we go, and that is the fact that every level has a different lesson to teach you about life. The first level is just the basic human town. And it's just people trying to live their everyday lives. They're like, oh, we need something to grind our wheat, and then the next thing you unlock is a windmill or like a water mill. Second level is all about animals. You're just picking up animals and you're restoring the forest, which is like very, I don't know, it has a very like interesting feel to it, if that makes some sense.
It does.
Third level is undersea. So you're basically saving a mermaid city this time. And you get to see some cultural differences between the mermaids and the people. which is I think another interesting element. The fourth level is it's like a mountain village,
is.
but it's not people. They're like these little creatures that I forget what their names are, but they spend a lot of time talking about how like they only live for 1 year. Like they are born, they grow old and die in 1 year. And so they have to live really hard, basically, is kind of what one of them says. About like
they're like a type of gnome or something.
Yeah, they're little gnomes that live for only a year, and so they have to like they talk about how like we have to live our lives as well as we can as in the 1 year that we have. Then the fifth level throws you for another thing where you're like, oh, I'm not even restoring living things anymore. I'm restoring like a chest of drawers. Yes. And this is where the pantheism kind of thing comes in, where it's like there's a concept in Japanese like culture called Tsukumogami. It's basically if there's an object that has been lovingly cared for and used for like 100 years, it gains a soul. And so the implication, the average English speaking player isn't going to know this, but the implication to the Japanese is that Dr. Leo, because level 5 is Dr. Leo's laboratory.
Yes.
And so the implication is that not only was Dr. Leo like a brilliant scientist and a brilliant inventor, but he also genuinely loved all of the things that he worked on so much that they gained souls in one person's lifetime, right? It's like mind-blowing things when you actually go back and kind of look at them carefully. And then level 6 was the castle town of Magrid Castle. So, that one's kind of similar to 1, but here you have the dark side of humanity versus the light side of humanity. So that's
an awesome explanation of that.
It's Rudy. So good. It's so good to experience it. And so like, it's just one of those things that puts this game way up above any of the other like Legend of Zelda top-down sword fighting clones that existed at the time. So that's the one thing I wanted to say about Soul Blazer before we move on.
Yeah, and honestly, people that want to hate on it and call it primitive and all that, they are not understanding the deeper aspects of the story, especially what you brought to the table, sir. That they are not getting it. It's not getting through their heads. And so
and this is something gamers fight about a lot, right? Like the balance between gameplay and story, right? There are people who are like, oh, I can't stand this. It has cutscenes, right? It's like, well, I mean, that's kind of a low bar for storytelling, but like at the same time, there's people who are like, I love this because it's like a movie. And there's people who make games that are like movies, and then people are like, well, this game's like a movie. It's like every other game this guy has made has been like a movie. If you don't like it, that's cool, but like it's like a movie is not a criticism of this particular creator's games. And similarly, like, oh, there's too much story in the Soul Blazer trilogy is like, no, I think genuinely you're looking at this from the wrong perspective, because if you look at what these games are, they're basically top-down hack and slashes. And they're not super interesting. TERRANIGMA has some fun gameplay aspects with like, acrobatic moves and stuff like that. But like realistically, the thing that is really interesting about these 3 games is the story they try to tell and the world they try to build, as opposed to the gameplay, which is pretty derivative, I'll be honest.
Right. But Quintet managed to weave such tales into these games. That they are made memorable for the rest of our lives. We will never forget these games.
No, I mean, it's Illusion of Gaia is in my top like 5 games of all time kind of thing. Like it's just like they did something so crazy with the way that they told a story that it's something that that blew my mind when I was 9 or 10 years old when I played it. And even today, if I go back and play the game, it's like, wow, they're really trying to do something here that is, I think, worth thinking about. Not just playing through the game and beating all the enemies, but also kind of like, what are the characters saying? What are they saying about themselves? What are they saying about each other? How did they fit all of this into, a tiny little Super Nintendo cartridge?
And as we get to 1993's own Illusion of Gaia, Across Upon Illusion of Time. Don't ask me why, but we have to get to that. Look at the leap. Look at the sprites.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, I mean, I've got the story. Oh my goodness, it's the papers are going out of control.
Of course.
But let's not even talk about that for right
Sure,
now.
sure.
Let's talk about the sprites. Look at how the sprites and the graphically, when you
Oh my
go
God.
now
This
about
game
18
is,
months later.
yeah. I mean, graphically, this game is a masterpiece. Like, just the sprite work is beautiful and detailed, and like there are little details that they put into the game. Like, if you're in certain areas, you know, Will's hair will blow around because he
Yes.
has kind of like, you know, medium long kind of hair for a young boy kind of hairstyle.
Yes.
And that's actually used to like solve puzzles in the game sometimes. Is your hair blowing around? Well, you know, let's find the spot where your hair blows around. Like
Ishtar's painting. It's one of Ishtar's trials at the Angel Village.
And you know, the variety in the characters. Like, I don't. There are a few like NPCs that have the same sprites. Certainly there are, but like the cast of characters that are in this game, just the variety in sprites and the variety in environments is something that is like really incredibly well done in this game. Like, you know, you'll be in the Nazca Plains 1 minute, and then you know, a little bit later you'll be, or maybe it was a little bit earlier, you'll be in Incan ruins, and you'll be you know, on the Great Wall of China, and all of these places, and all of the music and all of the sprites are all very unique. And yeah,
I mean, we're forgetting the music, and you know, look at the music. Yuzo Koshiro made the music for Soul Blazer.
Yes.
And then look, the one thing that is universal, no one can rip on the music for any of these games. The music is literally tremendous.
I mean, Koshiro is a master, you know, and he was at his most productive right then. He was doing Streets of Rage, right? Or what was it called? Bare Knuckle in Japan?
Streets of Rage series, Koshiro was involved with,
But he did ActRaiser, he did the Soul Blazer series. He was he is. I mean, he's still around. He's still making music.
Yes.
But back then he was incredibly creative and producing music that did things that like actual, like real classical music, like people who are knowledgeable are like, oh, that chord progression, I've never seen that before. That I can't believe he did that kind of thing. You know, there's so much going on in the music, and one of the things I really like about the Super Nintendo is that it finally had like general MIDI capabilities, and like it's kind of like showing off by winning a race with a car with a really small engine kind of thing, right? Like you're just so much better in the corners, and you're so much more economical about everything you do, that it's so impressive that you did all that, even with the relatively poor quality equipment you were working with. You managed to pull off something that's doubly stunning because you did it with such an economy of stuff that you had on you, kind of thing.
With such efficiency, it's incredible.
It's amazing.
And one thing to note that Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, who was involved, he actually came from my favorite company, NIHON Falcom.
Yes.
And he actually wrote the story for Ys book 1 and 2.
Oh, really? I did not know that. That's really cool. I mean, Ys 1 and 2 also had kind of a really interesting little bit of a philosophical feel behind them, and some deeper questions kind of being asked under the hood. You know, again, we're talking games that originally were on like the Master System. So when we talk about the level of economy that you need to maintain, you know, the Master System had even less memory space than like the NES did in a lot of games. So like, you know, creating something where you're like, ooh, that's got a kind of an interesting story hook on that system is even more of an accomplishment. It's really cool.
Oh, it truly is. So the sprites, the music, and then introducing play mechanics. In Illusion of Gaia, you've got special moves now that you can do against your enemies, that you earn them as you go through the game. And I find that interesting. But I'll tell you what, if anybody is using Pro Action Replay, I've got to warn you.
Yeah.
If you use the code to get 50 red gems, you get sent to the pyramid immediately.
Oh.
And you don't have the special, like the slide move or the.
Oh no!
You don't have those moves.
Oh no!
Yes.
And so it makes the game basically unbeatable. Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
And if you go all the way to the pyramid, aren't you past the point where you would use the 50th gem anyway, or jewel?
Yes, the 50th jewel. Yes.
So let's talk for a second about the 50 red jewels, because this is something that is a crazy aspect of Illusion of Gaia.
It is.
So throughout the game, you find these little jewels, and there's always like some guy in town who's like, "Oh, I'm in disguise. I'm Gem the Jeweler," I believe is what he calls himself in the American version.
Yeah.
And he's like, "If you find any red jewels, let me know, and I'll take them off your hands. And if they're filling up your inventory, you can even just send them straight to me from your inventory. Even if you're in a dungeon." And it's like, this guy's a little bit meta, number one. But number two, like, what are these gems doing? What are they for? He's like, "Oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it." The things that you have to do to collect some of these gems or jewels is one of the aspects of the game that I find really interesting. And there's one particular jewel in particular that I like to harp on because it's the most egregious example. In order to get one of the 50 red jewels, you know what's coming, right? The town of Phrygia.
Yes, I do.
In order to get one of the 50 red jewels, you have to hand in an escaped slave.
Yes.
If you're just playing it like it's a game and you're not thinking about any of the story that's going on, you just do it. But if you sit back and you think for a second about what you're actually doing, it's like, oh my god, what if I? Oh my god, are we the baddies kind of situation where it's like just for this one red jewel, and it's not even like the last one, because you can't go back in this game for the most part like you can in Soul Blazer. Once you move on to the next area, you're done. And so if you missed any of the jewels, you can't ever get 50 of them. And so like you have to, it's just a video game, but at the same time, that's kind of the whole point of Phrygia, is that you have this weird like dual class system between the people who are living in the front part of the city where they're all rich and happy, and then the people living in the back part of the city where half of them are slaves and the other half are destitute. And like just the fact that this all made it to a game that was marketed to 9-year-olds is like, whoa.
Well, it had a free shirt. If you bought it, you got a free Illusion of Gaia t-shirt.
Yeah, and, it's like...
And it was marketed to that, and it posed a deep philosophical question to children and teenagers.
And it's important to remember, this was before games had ratings either, right? Like there was no E for everyone or T for teen or M for mature. It was just like, it's a video game, ask your parents for it for Christmas and you'll get it kind of thing. Maybe, right? And
I think this was around the time. So I think this was around the time where Sega, on their own volition, started to introduce. See, that's when the Genesis and boxes, they switched to make them red stripe on the side.
Yes.
And Sega CD blue and 32X yellow and all this. And it was then that they introduced Sega preemptively introduced their own rating system. Well, at the same time that they came out with it, I think Illusion of Gaia came out on Super Nintendo.
Right.
And there was no rating on it.
Well, the reason for that was because the early Super Nintendo games were all already censored by Nintendo of America, right?
Heavily.
Mortal Kombat for the Super Nintendo had no blood, right? But Mortal Kombat for the Genesis did. And it was one of the reasons why kids wanted a Genesis, because they're like, I want the Mortal Kombat that has the blood flying around. But like at the same time, because Nintendo had its own censorship system, which was incredibly, which would just break games apart if they felt like they had to. Like Nintendo didn't have to rate its games, or so they thought. But Genesis, Sega comes out with this rating system, this proto rating system, to kind of help parents figure out what's best for their kids to play. When really the only thing that was in Genesis games that needed to be thought about was a little bit of blood and gore. But here we have like, oh yeah, if you want to 100% this game, you have to turn in an escaped slave. What? You know, it's like think about telling that to your mom or your dad who's about to buy this game for you. It's like, oh yeah, I could get the Mortal Kombat, which has little bits of red, red fake liquid flying out of people when they punch each other, or I can play this game where in order to win 100% and get everything in the game, I need to find and hand in an escaped slave to like some guy in a back alley of a town. It's like,
right.
Which one of these games needs the higher rating, right? But we were all totally ignorant of it at the time, because it's not like they advertised that as part of the game, but it's just in there. It's like, how did that get past the censors?
Well, and I remember Mortal Kombat. Now I gotta just move for Super Nintendo, the original one.
Right.
So you know what these are, right? These are some 70s opera glasses, right?
Yes,
so I'm trying
yes.
to look, and
Right.
and there was gray sweat.
Yes.
When you hit someone, you used. I can't even use these right. I can't even see all the gray sweat coming out of that Mortal Kombat 1 when you hit Kano or Johnny Cage or whoever. And so, it's brutal. But
yeah.
Now maybe those at home can hear me. Do you remember though? And then we have to get back to this in a second.
Yes.
Rise of the Dragon for Sega CD. That game got re-released as an MA-17 game. Originally, of course, it came out before Sega published their own ratings.
Right.
Well,
MA-17, really? That's crazy.
Yes, Rise of the Dragon was originally came out as an MA. It came out with no rating, but then my copy, when I got it at Software, etc. Yeah, I know. It had the sticker. They put just a sticker on it that said MA-17 on it.
Yep.
And well, that game's topics warranted an MA-17. But you might remember, in Nintendo Power, and I keep punching at nothing. I don't know what I'm punching at, but you remember Nintendo Power, where when they advertised the game.
Yeah.
And you'll know this in the village where everyone is famine stricken.
Yes.
They show the picture of all three, of Kara and Will, and it tied up.
Yeah.
And what is the prospective buyer or parent buying for their child thinking about that? Like, what's going to happen?
Just being tied up isn't that big of a deal, because it just could be like, we've been captured and we got to get ourselves out. Like, that was That's the kind of thing that you could have seen in like Inspector Gadget, right?
Of course, yeah.
Penny your brain with some ropes around their wrists or something like that.
Of course, yes.
But the thing about Illusion of Gaia is that you're not just kidnapped and you have to break out. Oh no. They don't ever actually go and say it. But it is very strongly implied that they are going to cook and eat you if you don't escape. And it's crazy.
And what ends up happening is, and like I said, if you're watching this expecting to be spoiler free, well, I'm sorry. That's just how it is. There's be
some spoilers, but these games are still worth playing, even if some of these moments have been spoiled, because seeing them for yourself and like being like, oh, this was marketed to 10-year-olds, and then like actually like reading what's on the screen and what's happening is way still worth it. Absolutely.
I want everyone to play all of these games.
Yeah.
They are unbelievable. They've left an indelible mark upon me. And on you, sir.
And on me.
I know
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
So Kara, who is, and you'll see this at the end, she is the Light Knight.
Yes.
But she is a princess,
right?
And she has a pet pig, and the pet pig, at the beginning of the game, gives Will a key, or to help him escape King Edward's dungeon.
Gosh, like the dungeon. Just being in that dungeon, you have to go in order to finish that dungeon section. You have to go look at the walls, and there's it talks about how like, oh, there's remnants of like a person who scratched something into the wall, as you know, as he lay here dying of starvation. And it's like, what? Right? You know, this is level 2 of the game, and here we are with like, you know, it's just throwing this kind of stuff at you, and then like a minute later, a pig comes to hand you a key to get out of jail so you can go through the dungeon. The tone moves around in some very interesting ways.
It really does, and
Yeah.
to see that pig somehow make it to that famine-stricken village,
right?
And then, as we'll explore in Granstream Saga, especially, the pig sacrifices itself and jumps into the fire.
Right.
And then the villagers there are now satiated.
Right.
They now see there's no need to cook the 3 intrepid heroes.
Yeah, that's another crazy moment in that game, because it's like, what's gonna happen to us? What's gonna happen? And then like, yeah, jeez, it's so memorable. I mean, like, and memorable is a weak word. Like it's like, whoa, they just did something that I did not expect to happen, and you know, it really adds a bunch of meaning to, because like in Soul Blazer you can talk to the animals, but Will can't talk to the animals in Illusion of Gaia, but they still have character and soul, and you know, I mean, Kara herself, you know, also gets a lot of really good development in the game, where she starts out as kind of like the stereotypical, you know, spoiled princess character, and then like, you know, then through a, it sounds crazy, but it's through an experience with scurvy that starts to turn her around into a more well-rounded character. Like, I'm sorry, did you just tell me that there's scurvy in this Super Nintendo game intended for 10-year-olds? I mean,
yes, and think about this. In the game, there are two sections where, you know, first Will and Kara are on a life raft.
Right.
Why are they on a life raft? Because they were on the Incan gold ship.
Yeah.
And where it's implied that Will was hallucinating this at first, and then we got to get to the reincarnation aspect of that after we talk about this.
Yeah.
But then, but getting back to the life raft, they're on it for weeks.
Yeah.
Will and Kara alone, and Kara starts to have not only develop feelings for Will, but starts to develop herself and to strengthen her resolve, and you know, become more of an adult.
Yeah.
And then when they're all stuck in the cave system for a month,
right,
and they're having to eat mushrooms and things, you have that element too, which is not present in any game up to then, that, and very few afterwards that I can think of.
Even now, there's so few games that do this kind of thing, where they actually like, where I don't even know how to describe it. Like it's not just having a character be an interesting character. It's like the character being an interesting character, becoming more interesting throughout the game, and also tying in to these very unique elements of the world that are like the kind of thing that you don't see in games for the most part these days. You know, you see a little bit of it here and there in some of the more artsy games, but like, you know, reincarnation ideas and pantheism and all these ideas are not things that are especially profitable. And so a lot of companies that make the bigger games that you think about when you think about like the really popular games, they don't touch any of this stuff, because it would cut into their bottom line. Whereas, you know, ENIX was bold enough to be like, you want to make a game about the reincarnation, not just of people, but of the whole Earth? Sure, let's do it. Well, yeah, go for it. Yeah, we'll see what happens. You know, it's like mind-blowingly amazing experimental stuff that nobody does these days. You know, ENIX and Square merged, and they've just been churning out Dragon Quest repeats and Final Fantasy repeats after that, pretty much. You know, and there have been some good elements of all of that too, but still, they're not touching anything interesting.
They might as well re-release Rad Racer while they're at it.
Or 3D World Runner.
Okay. So remember the water town? Was it
Yes.
Watermia or
yes?
and
That's another thing that got past the censors. That is like
so
what? I'll
so
let you do it. Yeah.
you know
Oh,
where
yeah.
I'm going with
Oh
this.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
in the northeast corner of that town, you have Will takes a raft at and this is
Must be done to beat the game.
yes, you have to do this to beat the game.
Yep.
And there are consequences if you choose incorrectly. Yes.
Oh yeah.
So you go get on this raft and you go to the northeast corner of town
Yep.
where they don't call it Russian roulette.
Right.
They call it Russian glass.
Right.
And there are 5 chalices and to pick from, and then Will start he doesn't start. The other guy who is the defending champion starts. Well, then you have to think, well, why is he playing this?
Right.
Well, he's doing it to earn money.
Yep.
Because his wife is pregnant with their child.
Yep.
So he needs money, and that's the only reason why he's risking his life for this. So
yep.
So
and it is in the game. You get to see that it is risking life. Like they're not like, it's not like, oh, you get sick for a little bit or you have to go to the doctor. It's like, no. If you pick the wrong glass, you die. And yeah, good luck, Will.
yes, and that's the thing. If you drink a glass where Will says, I don't have a good feeling about this,
right,
you die.
Yes.
In the game, you die. It's so what ends up happening in order to progress in the game, Will only drinks the chalices where he doesn't have a bad feeling.
Right.
Well, then the defending champion knows that the last chalice.
Yeah, there's one glass left, and all the other ones have been drunk.
So he knows that one is poisoned.
Right.
And so he nonetheless goes ahead and drinks that chalice, knowing that he will die.
Right.
And that he will leave behind a pregnant wife.
Yeah.
And Will, there is some, the thought process in Will's mind. Does Will kick the chalice away? But he doesn't.
Well, like Will tells him to stop, and the other guys tell him to stop. You know, you've already lost the match, right? There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you're going to gain by drinking that last glass. And he's like, no, I'm going to, I mean, it's complicated, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to do it anyway, because this is kind of like where my mind is. And it's like, you know, it doesn't give you a chance. He walks up to it, downs it in one gulp, and falls over. And you're like, I did that. And not only did I do that, but I had to do it in order to complete the game. And it's like, whoa, like this got past the censors too. Like, how did they do this? Did they just not show it to Nintendo America? Like, no, it's just a cool little game about a guy who hits people with a flute. Like, what? No.
Right. And well, look at what else got past the censors, and then we can go back to maybe the Ink and Gold ship and themes of reincarnation, because that is what we're talking about again with this game. Look at the jackal in the pyramid.
Yep.
What happens to him?
Oh my God.
And this isn't just...
So he's been chasing you and Kara for the whole game, basically.
Yes.
And you reach a point where he corners you in the pyramid, if I remember correctly.
At the hieroglyphs.
Yeah, the hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
And refresh my memory. Remind me how this goes down, because it's been a while for me.
Yeah, so when you get all of the hieroglyphs and you put them in the right positions,
right,
when you approach to put the 6th one in, then the jackal comes with Kara.
Yes.
But what ends up happening, and you have to know this.
Yes.
You have to know that, okay, I see these either large flame wicks, I won't even say they're candles. They're that when you go to do the last one or when you go, you See, now I'm forgetting, but
it's weird. It's jumbled. It's one of those things where you remember the end point of it, but like how you got there, you're kind of like, you kind of forget, because the point where it happens is so desperate. You're like, oh no, he's actually got Kara now. He's telling me to come out, so he's going to kill us both. We know he's going to kill us both if he gets his hands on us. And so like your only recourse is basically to do some tricks with these hieroglyphs to basically make him walk into a flamethrower to immolate himself until he falls down and perishes, and you just barely save Kara from it. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It's unbelievable. Well, Will knows about the booby trap,
right?
And how to call it, and then it's the way the jackal dies.
Yes,
and how he is left in a kind of burning, and he's still burning, and it looks a little bloody.
Yeah, it's
bad. How did that get past Nintendo of America when they themselves published it?
Maybe they didn't show it to them, and that's why we never got TERRANIGMA here. Wouldn't that be funny? Is that like it was revenge?
What? Yeah. There's been a lot of theories, and as we talk about TERRANIGMA, that as to why that did not get a release here.
Yeah.
There's many explanations, but some lead to this, and explaining, talking about the slave trade and talking about the idea that, and we have to get to.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a guy in Frisia who's like, no, I'm selling myself into slavery because I'm at such a desperate pass in my life. Like they don't treat it as just like this basic evil, right? Number one, if you want 100% the game, they make you participate in it. Number two, they don't ever treat anything in that game where like there's a cultural clash as if it's like, oh, we all know what's right and wrong here, and these people are clearly wrong. There's no point where the game preaches at you that this other culture that you just happen to be visiting is wrong here about this particular thing, right? Like they always are like, this is kind of how it is here. Some people are in desperate straits, and this is what happens to people who are in desperate straits here. It's a recurring theme where some people are pushed into desperation, from things as different as like just being desperately poor and having people that you want to support, to being desperately starving, to there's even a thing that you can trigger in the first town, in Will's hometown, where there's a couple, one of your friend's parents, they're fighting. And so if you open up one of the doors to go visit one of your friends, the first thing that happens when you open the door is a jar flies out and just barely misses hitting you in the head, kind of thing, because his parents are having a knockdown, drag out fight. Like this is a game that has these themes in it that like you would never see in a game that was pointed at 9-year-olds and 10-year-olds today. This game would have a high teen rating or a mature rating at this point, because people have gotten so like people allow violence these days in a teen game, but like these kind of like cultural things where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna talk about slavery. It's like MA immediately.
Yes.
And just like the fact that these things all made it past is just like, it's mind blowing, because if they hadn't, they would have gutted the whole game. They would have taken out all this stuff, and all of the interesting bits would have been gone, and you would have just had a mediocre Zelda clone with some characters that never get developed, and this game would have been nothing as opposed to what it actually was. It would have been another case where it's like, oh yeah, you have to play the Japanese version because the English version was gutted. And there are games like that where it's like, oh yeah, you don't play the English version because the censors gutted it for the purposes of reaching, either getting past censors or getting a rating that they wanted, as opposed to like, going for that teen rating, right? And it's just like,
right.
It's just crazy.
No, it really is. But these are deep questions to pose to young people and make them think about their own world.
Yeah. And like the difference is that there are for different people in other parts of the world too. You know,
Yes.
like you have the what do they call themselves? They call themselves like the fairy people or something, and they like have this hidden city, and they you know they have their whole own little culture that's kind of dependent on them not interacting with everybody else. You know, you visit a lot of these ruins that actually exist in the real world, but you're doing it in a world that doesn't look like Earth, like geographically. And so that's another question too. It's like, why are there Incan ruins here in the middle of this continent? That doesn't make any sense. Like this continent doesn't look anything like, you know, Central or South America.
Why is the Angkor Wat in Cambodia? Why? Why is that in this game?
Yeah, and you find out at the end, which we won't spoil the end, but like it's on theme, you know.
Yes. So the idea centrally, though, is that Will and Kara both are reincarnated of previous entities. And so there's this notion of a comet. And now the comet, you would think that the common theme would be, oh, the comet's going to crash into Earth.
Yep. That'd be the common.
Wrong. That's not how that's not how Mariko O'Hara.
Yeah, right?
Mariko O'Hara. Oh, well, now you see, this is where my dentures are starting to fail on me. Mariko O'Hara wrote the game. She's an outside writer.
Yeah.
And this kind of explains why there's not as many connections either to Soul Blazer or, you know, otherwise. And that's where, when we get to TERRANIGMA, those writers had to kind of tie it in with both Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer to make it a trilogy.
Right.
But we have these notions that this comet, it will pass around the planet, maybe stay in its orbit for a while and then leave.
Yes.
And every 800 years this happens. So and while the comet is encircling the planet, everything in their eyes evolves at a much quicker pace.
Yep.
And that's what has left us with, in some cases, superhuman, in some cases, complete destruction.
Yep.
And so
the idea of evolution is not a universally good thing. It is like one of those themes that a 9-year-old has no business, you know, thinking about, yet here it is.
Right. That not all advancement is a net benefit to humanity.
Right.
And it's not. Just like I've always said this, that the notion of a miracle, right, in one would say Christian mythology, but it could be universal.
Sure.
There is usually a positive connotation to it, but I would say that a miracle is something that happens outside of science and outside of, if one is looking at a deist mode where you have this order of things and it somehow fell outside of this order, well, that would be a miracle, but that could be positive or negative. It does not have to be universally positive. And we have that here too, where not every aspect of evolution will serve to benefit humanity. And again, the game touches on that, and it's tremendous. So, but the idea that Will and Kara, when you go to the Incan gold ship, Will, they refer to Will as their king.
Yes.
And at the time when you get there, you're thinking, well, why are they talking about me as their king?
Yep.
But then the queen has a ring.
Yep.
And it turns out that's Kara's ring, that at the end of the game, that Kara has that ring, and it turns out she is the rightful wearer of that ring, which enables her and Will to unite.
Yep.
Will is the dark knight.
Yep.
Kara is the light knight.
Yep.
And together they will unify in order to defeat Dark Gaia. That's the idea. That's the notion. So you have, through the game, though, it's implied that this has happened multiple times, at least 4 times.
Yeah.
Over the span of 3,200 years.
Yep.
So, I mean, again, it's incredible. The storytelling is something else. And then what about the Angel Village?
Yeah.
Now think about that. They can't be exposed to sunlight.
Right.
They're immortal.
Right.
But they lead humdrum lives.
Yeah.
So now Mariko Ohara has a thing about vampires, and you notice there are vampire bosses.
There's like one vampire boss, one vampire pair that make a boss, and then there's no vampires in the rest of the game or something like that. It's very,
there are no vampires in the rest of the game, but it does seem that those in that Angel Village now.
Yeah.
I almost seem to think that they're fallen angels. Now,
they could very well be.
The game explanation is that they are evolved humans from the comet, that they've evolved so much faster, but as a result, they can't be exposed to sunlight. And that's an open-ended question there.
Well, they have their whole like little like subterranean culture too, and they have that. There's that painter that like that part of the game is really like kind of like a mind trip, honestly, where you're just like, what the, like there's a bunch of puzzle pieces here that don't quite fit together. And so if you're actually paying attention, it's one of those parts of the game where you're like, I need to pay attention because I don't know what the hell's going on, right? You know, you have you're in, what is it called? Mu?
Yeah, Mu, yeah.
And like it's basically Atlantis effectively. But like there's vampires and there's ancient civilization stuff that's talking to you, and you're like, you know, Will certainly has a bit of like chosen one kind of thing going on, but it turns out that he's not like the chosen one that you think he is, because as you mentioned, you know, he's the Dark Knight. And this is another thing too, where it's like in Illusion of Gaia, you know, good and evil and light and dark are not the same things either. So it's like there's another little element of like thematically where it's like, yeah, we're doing something a little different than what everybody else is doing.
So look at in Taoism, you know, you have the yin and the yang. You have your yin would be earth-based, but that's considered dark or temporal. Right. And then the yang literally is heavens, sky, and that is light, we'll say. So but it does not indicate that the yin is bad and the yang is good. No, they are needed together and they don't work without the other. Right.
They complete each other.
They complete each other.
And there's the element of that with Will and Kara as well, which is also handled in like a really mature way. Like not like you feel like if it were like if the influence were like from like an anime or something like that, right? That it would be a little bit more like sketchier, I guess.
Yes.
Again, that would be the kind of thing that would trip the censors. But like the way that Will and Kara kind of become close to each other is handled in a really like interesting and unique and like spiritual way rather than kind of like directly romantic. It's really interesting the way the characters like interact with each other just in general.
I think that at the end, I think if the game was released a few years later, that they would have shown Will and Kara falling in love at the end when they go back to school and their memories are erased, but there's a part of each other that thinks,
well, it's not just them, right? It's that whole group of friends that you started out with at the beginning, and they're all back together again at the end after being separated by so many different events throughout the course of the story, right? Like, you know, Seth is a great example, right? We talked about him a little bit before the recording because I couldn't remember his name. But Seth is this character who is kind of a quiet kid, but he's part of the group of friends, and like you lose him in the Incan ship. Like, I think it's the Incan ship, right?
Yes, yes,
Pretty sure.
that's when the Leviathan, which they call Riverson in the translation, but it's
Right.
Leviathan, and so Seth is lost and then ends up getting swallowed.
Right. And then he kind of reincarnates into Leviathan or Riverson as like the will of that thing, which comes up later when when the rest of the party is kind of walking through this really long tunnel that leads to the Angels Village. It's just like, it's mind blowing. Some of the stuff that was done in this game of like these recurring cycles, and how like these characters get separated, but then they get brought back together in a different way too. Like, it's not just like, it doesn't end with just like everybody kind of meets up and we're all happy and everything's good. It's that everyone got separated, and some of them like literally died and were reincarnated into different creatures. And then at the end, they're all back together, but they don't realize that they're connected in that way either. And so it's like, you know, when you're 9 years old, you think about your friends and you're going to be with your friends forever kind of thing. And, you know, you're always going to have the memories of you with your friends. And you don't really think about the possibility that like we'll be separated, but then later on, you know, we'll be back together in the next life kind of thing. Like, that's not the kind of thing that a 9-year-old, you know, American kid is going to think about, but it's in the game and it's just there. And you're just like, oh, wow, this is deeper than I expected it to be.
I mean, even at a more superficial level, Lance decides, well, I'm going to stay with Lily.
Yeah.
And he leaves the group.
Right. And so does Lily, right? Because
yes,
she was kind of
and
part
so
of the
is
group
Lily.
temporarily
Yes.
as well. There's it's just like, you know, it's meeting and parting and rebirth and seeing things happening again, but in a slightly different way and stuff like that. It's just really fascinating stuff if you sit down and actually pay attention to it. Because like nowadays, people don't have to pay attention to games because everything's spoken and there's yellow paint on everything that you need to find.
Yeah, it's tremendous. But the to wrap up kind of Illusion of Gaia, I think the game's story is life-changing in a way.
I mean, it is something I
think.
will always remember for the rest of my life. You know, it's just like this was something that I saw when I was 9 or 10 years old that, like, yeah, it changed my life. It moved me in a different direction into actually like thinking about stories, just thinking about stories in a serious way, right? Like, as like, oh, there can be stuff that isn't just like action or mystery or whatever. There can be actual good questions asked in these things that you never would have expected.
It was. Now we'll get to the game though. The game itself, I'll say this. There are parts of it like Mu or Mount Cress or the pyramid where you have to be Shadow, which that's an aspect that you gain when you're at the pyramid.
Right.
In trying to figure out how to beat that pyramid and figuring out where as Shadow you have to descend.
Yep.
Through it was a little irritating, and then
there's a trial and error aspect to it, yeah.
And then the backtracking, I wasn't a fan of that. Where
sure
there are certain parts where you have to be Friedan in order to progress, and then others where because you have to use the slide move, therefore you needed to be Will.
Right.
Kind of irritating, but
I mean, it was a puzzle aspect to the game to a certain degree, right? It's like, oh, I need to solve this problem. I need the reach that Friedan has, or I need the slide that Will has, or sometimes even you need the spinning move that Will has that lets you fly over stuff. I mean, you know, it was one of the things that made the game, to me, it made the gameplay a little bit more varied, because otherwise it's basically tap a direction and hit the attack button, and Will does a jumping attack that does maximum damage. And you just do that over and over again until you win.
But all in all, wonderful game. cannot recommend it enough. Soul Blazer for me was, I'll always remember that game, but Illusion of Gaia, what a way to follow up a game like that.
Yeah.
And so now let's talk about
TERRANIGMA
and its protracted release and non-release in the United States.
Right.
So it was released in late 1995. And the European regions did not get it until either 1996 or the latest was 1997, I think, April.
Wow. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah,
either in Germany or something.
Like, people have to remember that back then, a lot of games just didn't get localized. And so
they didn't, no.
And so like you would have like an expose in like Nintendo Power where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna get Dragon Quest V, in the next few months. The grapevine says so. And then months pass and Dragon Quest V is nowhere to be found. And oh well, it happens.
I don't know how many games where I was disappointed, and I'm looking through my die-hard game fan, and
yeah.
You remember that.
Yeah, well, like Tactics Ogre never came out here.
Yeah.
Right? Like we had Ogre Battle, but we never had Tactics Ogre. We never got the first Star Ocean. We never got Tales of Fantasia. There's just a long list of these games that Nintendo of America was like, nah, they don't need that. And like we're lucky enough that we kind of have an official English translation of TERRANIGMA because it came out in an English version in Europe. But then there was also the issue where the European stuff all ran at 50 hertz and the American stuff all ran at 60 hertz. And so you couldn't just swap the cartridges in because, the voltages were different and you might damage something. And this was something they did for Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 2, was the games had an internal thing that would determine whether they were running on 50 hertz or 60 hertz, and it wouldn't run on the wrong hertz anyway. So this was back in the day when we gotta make sure that we don't let anyone in America get these games, or don't let anyone in Europe get these games. And and think about it, this was before they were doing things like licensing songs, because that's that can be kind of a semi-legitimate reason why you limit a release. It's like, oh well, we licensed the song, and the song we licensed it only for Japan, and it would have cost us another $50,000 to license it for the US because it's a popular song, and so we just had to kind of stick to Japan because we licensed it there and we didn't license it here. So later on, you go and you find someone who's selling these things secondhand, and you get the Japanese version, and hopefully you can read enough of it that you can play the game, and you're like, oh, this song is in here, cool. That's kind of like something that we see these days. That's the part of the reason why like a lot of games will like vanish off of Steam or whatever, right? Because those licenses, not only are they only licensed for certain places, but they will also be licensed only for certain times. And so like at some point the creator of the game can no longer sell it with this stuff in there. So they either have to gut the song or they have to relicense it again. And one destroys the game and the other one destroys their wallets. And so, you end up with these cases where it's like, well, if you didn't get it by now, it's gone.
So to go to why Nintendo, before we talk about this amazing game,
sure,
and the themes, why Nintendo of America, or for that matter, ENIX, failed to release this in the United States. Let's just start going through the list of possible reasons. So number one, that ENIX closed its U.S. subsidiary a few months before.
Mm-hmm.
So they did not have an official U.S. subsidiary, so they would have had to ask another third party or Nintendo themselves to publish it in the United States.
Yep.
Oddly enough, they would return a couple years later.
Yes.
Hold on. Did they officially release Dragon Warrior 7 on PlayStation 1, or did they get someone else to do it?
I think they did it. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go find my copy of it, which is not at hand. but
let's.
I'm pretty sure it had the ENIX name on it.
Yeah. So the
it was released as Dragon Warrior 7. They still didn't have the Dragon Quest trademark at that point.
You're right. So it's Dragon Warrior 7. Oh, it came out in Japan August of 2000, but in North America November 1st, 2001.
Yep.
So, and then
it's quite a wait, you know.
Are you serious? This game was supposed to be released for the oh my gosh. Oh, the Nintendo 64 DD. That's right. It's magneto optical power, baby. Yeah.
I'm sure that the frequency is on the back of the CD case, right? Get some Metal Gear Solid references in there. Oh man, magneto optical discs. Talk about it's one of those things where like it's a good idea, but at the same time, CDs already had the massive like market advantage, and so just like, oh, you mean I need to get different hardware in order to run this stuff? And you know, hardware has always been one of the things that Nintendo charges you out the rear end for. So, you know, it's like, well, that's not gonna make it to the US. That's just not gonna happen.
I gotta ask you though.
Yeah.
So growing up,
yeah,
and think about, you know, maybe in various computer labs that we've used. Do you remember the SYQUEST drives?
Ooh,
so they had the 5 1/4, which was 44 megabyte, 88 megabyte.
Those I don't remember. I remember the super discs, which were about 100 megs, I think. They looked just like standard 3.5 inches.
Those are the LS 120s.
Okay.
They were 100. They were to combat the iOmega zip drive.
The iOmega zip drive. That monster. I think I still have one of those discs laying around somewhere.
Listen, you know the story about those, right?
You've told me about it before, that there was like a flaw that would like spread from disk to disk reader, and then from disk reader back to disk. And so all of these things are completely destroyed by now.
So and I'm getting excited now. So the iOmega zip drive, if you know, and there's a known flaw in the drives,
right?
Where if the drive itself becomes bad, every disk that you put in it to try to read it, well, the disk will end up getting screwed up,
right?
And therefore made unreadable. And you don't know this. You're thinking, oh, well, the drive can't access this disk. Maybe it's a problem with the disk. Well, the disk was fine until you put it in the drive.
Yep.
And so the zip drives, originally they were 100, and I got the one that was 200. Or 200 or 250. I don't remember, but it was 250.
They have the jazz drives too.
And oh, jeez. Oh, more, I mean, oh my goodness, well, you know, they had issues too, but but the drives would just fail, but at least they would not corrupt successive jazz removable discs. Well, anyway, so the idea behind the 64DD was they would leverage this magneto optical technology,
right? Because
Nintendo still did not want garden variety CDs. They still did not have and we see this with GameCube. Was that a standard disc?
No, of course not.
Of course not. Of course not. So we see this out of Nintendo. So, but yes, ENIX of America, but this is 2001,
right?
Where they reestablished themselves and released Dragon Warrior 7.
Right.
But let's go back 6 years.
Yes.
6 years earlier, they had closed their American subsidiary. Well, so
they Dragon Quest, it's worth reminding people that Dragon Quest in Japan was a license for ENIX to print money. Like, it was so bad that there was a law passed that a Dragon Quest game could not be released on a work day. Because it would, because like people would just skip. They'd skip school, they'd skip work, they'd go get Dragon Quest, and they'd play it for 24 hours, kind of thing. in America, things were completely reversed. Squaresoft was the big seller of RPGs and stuff in America. ENIX was the niche, because they didn't bother releasing their Dragon Quest games for the most part. We got 1 through 4 on the NES, but we never got any of the Super Nintendo ones. And so, you got the games like Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, which were beyond the tastes of most of the kids that had SNESs back in the day. It was one of those things where, I only started to really appreciate it on multiple playthroughs, right? And so it's like, oh, well, this game doesn't have much to it, so, we'll just not worry about it too much. ENIX was not selling well in the US, just in general. Square was, which is why a lot of people in the US think that Square bought ENIX back when they merged, but it was actually closer to ENIX buying Square, because in Japan, ENIX was the much larger company. Now they're combined together into a massive conglomerate that never does anything creative. So, that's our fun situation today.
Well, people forget what happened with Square, I think. Look at in America, and this bolsters your point. They advertised on MTV for Secret of Evermore. Yeah,
well, Secret of Evermore was a weird one too, because that was an American American gig that was based on the Secret of Mana engine, where we got Secret of Mana, we got Seiken Densetsu 2. Seiken Densetsu 1 we got as Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy. Yes. Nobody played that, pretty much. Like a very few.
We did, but no
I didn't play that one. I never had that one.
Oh, really?
I basically didn't have a Game Boy ever, so I never played.
Oh.
I think I played like a couple of hours of Final Fantasy Legend 1 and a couple hours of Final Fantasy Legend 3. I never played Final Fantasy Adventure.
You never played Legend 2?
No, I never did.
Oh my! Oh! Geez.
Yeah.
It's one Saga 2, which is Final Fantasy Legend 2. It's in my top 20 of all time.
Oh,
it's
wow,
in my
really?
personal top 20. So
okay, that's amazing. Actually, I need to. I bought them on Steam. They re-released them, so I've been going through Saga 1. And I'll eventually
get the DS one. Get the DS one, or find get the DS. They have a patch for it.
Sure.
To English.
Yeah.
They made it a 3-dimensional, but the game mechanics, they cleaned up some of the mechanics. Saga 2 is incredible. I've got memories of going, and for those who live in the Midwest, you know what I'm talking about. I'm on a trip to Shipshewana.
Yeah.
Legendary Amish, where they have flea markets, and they have others where you could buy Amish furniture there.
Yep.
My dad, on a whim, decides, hey, we're going to go to Shipshewana. And it's just me and you.
Yeah.
And so here I am. I know I'm 11 or whatever.
Yeah, you can't drive yet, so you can't drive in the car.
So I'm sitting in the car with my Game Boy. I know I got my pipe here, but imagine I have the old school fat Game Boy.
Yep.
And here I'm fighting Ashura, the desert boss, where enemies are in the towns in the desert level where you are, and I'm playing it and I'm excited, and then the batteries die on me.
Oh, jeez. The thing about the Game Boy one is that you could tell when the batteries were almost dying because the little red light would dim out, and you'd be like, "Oh, I gotta save. I gotta get a password, or I gotta save or something." You just hope you have that. You see that thing dimming out, and you're like, "It's the ticking clock. Damn it!"
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Well, it's better than Game Gear, though. I mean,
the Game Boy, the original Game Boy was 4 AA batteries, and it would last like pretty decent amount of time, 8 hours or something like that.
Yes.
Like pretty decent amount of time for 4 AA's. Your parents would hate buying you AA's over and over and over again, so you'd usually get like a pack or a plug-in thing for it, so you could play it at home without using up the batteries. The Game Gear, oh my God, 6 AA's and 2 hours of screen time because they backlit it. And backlighting was great because they could do a color screen and make it look pretty nice. But man, it ate those batteries.
Especially if you had the TV tuner.
Oh God, yeah.
You have that TV tuner on top of the Game Gear. Oh my.
Yep.
Oh boy, but so Square was riding high with Secret of Evermore. They had a cash flow from Secret of Mana, Seiken Densetsu 2.
Yep.
But then
that's another game that we didn't get, was Seiken Densetsu 3.
So there's some thoughts on that. Maybe that's another podcast episode, because that game's difficulty, I'm not sure those enthralled by Secret of Mana here.
Yeah.
That game is in a way too difficult for most people.
It's very, very hard. And they dumbed it down a bunch for the, the remastered re-release on PlayStation 3 or 4.
Well, they had to. That game was brutal in its difficulty.
Well, the mechanics on it were really weird too. Like Secret of Mana was really smooth playing, and Seiken Densetsu 3 was a lot. Your movement was slower. Your movement was a little blockier. You kind of extended yourself when you attacked in ways that made it easier for enemies to hit you. The bosses were often kind of really hard to like touch or hit. Stuff like that made that game a real slog. Not a slog, but just really difficult.
Really difficult. And so then, though, Square's riding high. They have, Final Fantasy 3, which is 6 in canon, came out, and people forget it was $70 to $80. Chrono Trigger actually sold well here. That was $80. I remember that. Oof. But then they made the misstep of that movie later. They were riding high with Final Fantasy 7, which gave them the budget to make 8, and 8 sold well enough that, hey, we're going to do that. We will do this movie, and they lost.
That movie was a huge loss of money for them, which is unfortunate because it also made it so that they were less likely to experiment in the future. We were never going to get an Illusion of Gaia from Squaresoft after that point.
Thing about this, they released that Tobal #1.
Yep, for PlayStation 1.
And then Square actually released some racing game for PlayStation 2. That was their first PlayStation 2
I have
game.
That. It's Driving Emotion R.
Driving Emotion.
I think it was called, I think the English version was called Driving Emotion R or something like that. And I was like, oh, Squaresoft. I was like, oh, Squaresoft made a racing game for PS2. Terrible game. Terrible.
Horrible. And but that movie
because it was incompatible with the steering wheel attachment for the PS2. Like there was one. I actually have it, and it works perfectly beautifully on Gran Turismo 3 and 4. But I tried it because I was like, oh, I have that Driving Emotion game. I wonder if the wheel works for that. It does not. And so it's like a racing game where you can't use the thing that you're supposed to use for the racing game, even though you spent the $200 on the freaking racing wheel. It's kind of ridiculous.
It was beyond ridiculous.
Well,
and
the steering's impossible with the analog stick because it's like you move your thumb like a quarter of an inch and the driver just 90 degrees.
Well, you can ask our friends about the CDI, Philips CDI, trying to do it with the remote.
Yep.
Horrible. Just horrible. That's another episode. But anyway, So Square got beat down in that mode, and
which is honestly kind of sad because that movie wasn't that bad. Like it
wasn't bad.
People wanted it to be Final Fantasy 6 or Final Fantasy 7, and because it was like a future sci-fi thing, they kind of rejected it out of hand. Whereas like the later Final Fantasies started getting more modern as well, and some of them were pretty good too. Like Final Fantasy 13 has some major problems, but art design is not one of them, right? Final Fantasy 15, I think a lot of people have a hit or miss like relationship with it, but for me, Final Fantasy 15 was kind of a return to the kind of like close in character studies that I enjoyed so much in like Illusion of Gaia and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, it's just 4 people that are kind of, on a journey together, and they have to kind of, deal with the conflicts that are between them, and they care about each other genuinely, and it's the kind of thing that kind of goes a little bit deeper than a lot of plain old, fantasy stories go, where it's just like, I serve the king of such and such, and it's like, well, that's all you do, then fine, whatever, but it's not It's not a connection,
So it's unfortunate, but it's more or less ENIX bought Square. That ENIX, I think, would have the majority in that merger.
Yeah.
slim majority, but they would have it because they decided not to be as bold with who they're giving, which development houses they're giving money to. And then,
Right.
Quintet itself implodes, and we'll get to that in Granstream Saga. But
Yes.
TERRANIGMA, so you think Nintendo, so first, ENIX closed down the subsidiary.
Right.
Number two, we look at the Nintendo 64.
Yep.
That was released at the end of 95 as well.
Oh man. So yeah, you're right. That's another big deal because like there was a bunch of stuff that was supposed to show up on the N64 that never did, right? Mother 3 was supposed to originally be an N64 game, and they ended up pushing it all the way back to the Game Boy Advance. Whew.
Yes, so what that meant was and Mother 3 was a Nintendo product.
Yeah.
Imagine a third party.
It was a Nintendo published product, but
that's what I mean.
I think
yeah.
Ape is kind of like Quintet. Ape to Nintendo is kind of like Quintet to ENIX because Quintet never really made games for anybody other than ENIX. But like, and Ape never made games for anybody other than Nintendo. But they were kind of like their own little subculture that had the ability to do interesting things sometimes. Right.
Kind of like Rare was with Nintendo before Microsoft bought them.
Killer Instinct.
and Donkey Kong Country and oh my god.
Turok.
And Turok, right? Turok the Monster Hunter. Oh
Dinosaur
my goodness.
Hunter, yeah. And Donkey Kong Country was Rare as well.
Yeah, so
they were hit and miss sometimes, but they were that was a label that you did not ignore. Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, those were Rare. So,
Right. So again, but look at third parties. I'm sure in 95 when Nintendo is thinking, well, you should be publishing for our Nintendo 64.
Yep.
And not the legacy Super Nintendo / Famicom.
Right.
Well, ENIX went ahead and released TERRANIGMA in Japan in late 95.
Right.
But for an American release, which would happen at, because as we know, they never did simultaneous releases.
No. They couldn't. They just didn't have the supply chain for it, Translation took time. And like they had to reprogram stuff and change things. And this all had to be done by artists in Japan. And so like, it just took forever.
It took forever. So it would be pushed to 96. And then how many SNES games were released in 96? Not many.
Not a whole lot, no.
So you have that aspect. We're not even talking about the game's content yet.
Right.
And so those two are the likely causes right there.
Yeah, I mean the no subsidiary in America is honestly probably the hardest hitter because they're like, well, we don't have imagine being a Japanese guy who doesn't speak English in Japan and you have a video game and you're like, all right, if we wanted to bring this to America, how do we do it? I don't know. America's not our market anyway. Our market's Japan, so we're fine here. We'll be all right. That's kind of the lazy answer, but it's a pretty reasonable one.
It seems that way. The the banner on the message boards lately, they all point to the game's content. Well, it didn't even have to get to the content for the game to be passed on. Whereas in European markets, whether there's a demand for it or ENIX still had their subsidiaries or that it could, but they were released much later. In Britain, I think it was 96, and in Germany it was 97.
Yeah.
And I mean that's very late.
Sure.
But they got these platforms later than the Americans did.
Probably
so
the
like
older consoles
the Nintendo
had a little bit more staying power in Europe than they did in the US. The US is always the new stuff, whereas Europe is a little bit behind in video games sometimes, or at least was back then.
Well, Amiga CD32. Now, come on. Now everyone wanted to play the Codemasters games. and so So now let's get to TERRANIGMA. I think to talk about the game's content, we have the dark and light aspects expounded upon tremendously. I mean, it starts off the bat. You're in TERRANIGMA, the world is kind of like a holosphere.
Yes,
or
that's exactly right. There's not just the light-dark duality, but there's also the inside-outside duality, which is also kind of another big thing that happens. Because like you have like later on in TERRANIGMA, there's like a magic forest where you're either on the inside or you're on the outside, and it's not quite as simple as just walking through a forest. Or the kings of various areas are like, yeah, you're either part of my retinue or you're on the outside. And so this was kind of something that happened a lot. This is something that got touched on a lot in TERRANIGMA, as well as just the simple light-dark thing that we've seen in the earlier games.
Right. It expands on that duality. The duality is not simply light-dark, but rather in or out, or your actions warrant that you're in this group or you're not in this group, this retinue, right. And it's but the light dark interplay is really expounded upon, and it hits you right off the bat.
Yeah,
you don't know your hero, which is named Ark, like yep. It's kind of a combination of what you do in the game. You're kind of like Noah,
yeah,
in his Ark,
yeah,
yeah. and then you're also you could also bring up Ark of the Covenant too, but you start off as Dark Ark. You don't know that you are the dark version. So what is that dark version? Well, spoiler alert, and of course there are a ton of spoilers here, but that's what we do. Dark Gaia returns in this game. Well, Dark Gaia created dark copies of those that existed in the light side, meaning on the surface world.
Right.
And made these copies and put them in the dark world, which is inside the holosphere.
Right.
And graphically, the way they represent this holosphere when you start the game is surreal.
Oh, yeah. That's like some weird Mode 7 stuff that, like, this was before polygons were frequent occurrences in games, but we had ways to take like basically large bitmaps and pretend to curve them. And so you have this very strange, like, surreal is a great word for it, because you go out, because the village looks normal, just like a regular kind of medieval forest village kind of thing. Yeah. And then you walk out, and like the whole thing around you is so weird that you think maybe, because the first time I played this game was on an emulator, right? And so like I was like, maybe the emulator screwed up, maybe it did something wrong. But you get the game, you get a cartridge, you plug it in, and it's the same weird thing where you're like seeing the world above you and below you at the same time. And like as you walk, it curves in this very unnatural feeling way. It's really interesting, but also really unsettling at the same time. And so right off the bat, the game is putting you on your back foot. You're like, what am I actually doing here? What is this place? Where am I? And how do I get out? Kind of thing. You want to escape.
Well, then you think in the town that you start in, his name is Krista, and short for Crystal Blue.
Right.
And what you see above you, well, it turns out that that's the essence from which humans come from and return to.
Yeah, yeah.
They
tell you not to look at it. There's kind of a mystique and a danger to it as well, which is like kind of one of the early on parts of the game where you're like, what exactly is going on here? I want to know more. It's a great hook. Yes.
So, of course, you have the Pandora's box, and of course, the Elder. And spoiler, the Elder is Dark Gaia, and that's why he's down in the, for lack of a better term, dark world. We'll say inner world, but I will just say dark world.
Sure.
The Elder is there, And now Ark has a girlfriend there. Her name is Elle, and loves her, and well, she loves him.
Yeah.
And you get a sense in the game that there's almost a predestination in some aspects. Elle knows that after Ark opens a Pandora's box,
Yeah.
gets this evolved creature named Yomi.
Yep.
And it's dark Yomi. You'll find that out later too.
Yep.
And then from there, the elder tells him, well, you have to now free the continents on the surface world, and therefore you undergo I'm trying to count 5 trials.
Right.
And to unlock the 5 major continents.
Which the world map in that game looks bizarre. Like this is just an art direction thing, but like video games have done like fake Earth, or like recreate Earth in like Dragon Quest 3 is a good example of that, where it's Earth. The continents are the right sizes and they're in the right places and they're oriented correctly. When you start unlocking the continents in TERRANIGMA, you get this like picture of like a map, and it's so distorted that it's actually pretty funny. So one of the things that I noticed in the game that was just like that, it instinctively makes you like pull back and you're like, ew, like they didn't. Why did they? There's so much work put into the game everywhere else, and then they have this like world map that looks like it was drawn in finger paints by a kid, basically.
And they made Japan the center of the world, whereas on most world maps, you'll see the center being either Europe or Africa or something. But here, Japan is magically the center of the universe.
I think that's pretty common in a lot of countries where they publish maps that have their own country closer to the center, especially for like Mercator projections or whatever, right? It's just like, we got to have the center somewhere, and the further away you get from the center, the more distorted things are. And so if you're in Japan and you want a world map, it's going to be fairly good at showing you what Japan actually looks like. You put it at the center so that's the least distorted part.
Right. Well, that would make sense. So then when Ark finishes the trials, and Elle knows that. Go ahead.
I mean, we'll get to the trials in a minute because they are important and big. But yeah, go ahead.
So Elle knows that Ark has to go away and knows that he'll go away for a long time. And Elle doesn't want this situation to end.
Yeah.
Because as we will discuss in a little bit, that she, which is Dark Elle, that she plays a hand in how the story develops later on. But let's get to the trials.
Yeah. I mean, it starts out feeling very simple. Basically, the elder tells you go to these 5. Or is it elder or Yomi that tells you to go to these 5 places?
The elder does.
Okay,
the elder
tells you that there's 5 towers, and you have to conquer these 5 towers in order to do whatever it is that he's trying to get you to do. And so you basically go and you go into the first tower, and it's basically just like a Secret of Mana dungeon almost. And this is where you see where they spent more of the time working on making the game more fun and dynamic to play and less time thinking about the story. Because we have a lot of different like special moves that Ark can do to fight his enemies. We have a couple of different kinds of jumping attacks. We have a jumping downward lunge. We have a Psycho Crusher move. We have a Chun-Li kind of repeated stabs, or I guess E Honda kind of repeated stabs of a spear kind of thing. There's a lot of really cool action potential for the game. And there are some enemies where they're only vulnerable to certain types of these attacks too. And so you have to actually kind of experiment with things and learn what works against who in a very organic way that works really well. It's a fun game to play as compared to Soul Blazer or Secret of or Illusion of Gaia, which were a little stiff in their controls, generally speaking.
Correct. I know in Illusion of Gaia, it was hard to do diagonal stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it was a lot easier to do it in Terranigma to do that. But yes, the first 5 trials are kind of to get the player acquainted with different moves and various platforming elements.
Yeah.
In the
There's
game.
Jumping. It also has like a genuine like level up system where where Soul Blazer had one that was super simple. Illusion of Gaia kind of got rid of leveling. You pick up these little items that give you more hit points or whatever throughout the game. Yeah, it's just much more action oriented in Terranigma.
So when Ark releases the 5 continents, then the elder tells him, well, now you must release the plants and animals.
Right.
So unlike in Illusion of Gaia, but just like in Soul Blazer, at least to this point, you can speak with plants and animals.
Right, right.
And you will need to speak with them in, first freeing up the plant life.
Yep.
Then freeing the birds.
Because it's worth noting that when you finish the 5 trials, basically there's a little bit of story elements that happen, and then suddenly you get thrown out into the outer world, and
literally,
it's not,
yeah,
literally, and like it's not like a green place with no people and no animals. It's literally like a barren nuclear apocalyptic wasteland. You know, you have the classic Super Nintendo wind, rushing wind sound in the background. You have this very dark and like minimalist music, and Ark kind of just wakes up in this world that he's never seen before. And it's like, yeah, you got to restore everything because right now there's literally not a plant alive on the whole planet. I think there's like one flower that like you wake up and there's like a little flower that you can talk to, and it's like everything else is just dead.
Just like Soul Blazer in the beginning, there's a lily there.
Soul Blazer had grass and stuff like that, but there's not even any grass.
True, it's all barren.
It's barren, like apocalyptic nuclear wasteland kind of thing. And it's like, okay, time to bring back the plants. And it's like, first off, it's a major change in tone because the tone up to that point had been kind of standard fantasy tropes kind of stuff. You have your sweetheart back in town, and the town is where you can go and buy items, and you're fighting these towers, and it's all very kind of game-like. And then you get thrown into this just barren wasteland. It's like, good luck, and you can't get back to town. You're just ejected from everything that you're kind of used to, and now you're kind of on this quest that you don't know when this quest is going to end or if it's going to end.
Right. You don't know how. You don't know. You have some notion that you're rescuing plants and animals, and then But after that, then of course the game takes a turn. But as you release the birds, and where you're now utilizing the galls to go from place to place.
Yep.
And again, I find it. So it's similar in a way to Soul Blazer, but not in the way you do it, but in the end result, which is it's just that you're freeing them in order. So plants and animals come first, and then the lion cub who has to undergo the trial to become the Lion King.
Yep. That's one of the fun parts of the game.
One really fun part where you're escorting the lion cub.
Right, because escort missions are always the best part of any game.
when they don't get irritating.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that was great. And then that's our first aspect, not to be too trusting.
Yeah.
Of course, the mud doll says, here, cross this bridge.
Yep.
Oops. Guess not. Guess I shouldn't have done that.
Right.
So, but then the lion cub comes to your rescue after you hurt the mud doll, and then the lion cub ends up defeating the mud doll.
Right.
So when you finally do free the plants and animals, then the elder says, okay, now it's time to start freeing humans and start this technological advancement.
Yeah.
Because when you free the humans, then they're continuing the work that they were doing when they were frozen or suspended.
Right. Yeah. It's another evolution theme, because you free the animals and plants kind of in order of complexity. And then you start releasing the people, and you start releasing the people in order of complexity too. You start out with basically, tribesmen that are just kind of like not quite Stone Age, but kind of Bronze Age tribesmen kind of things.
Yes.
And you go all the way up to like metropolitan, modern tech stuff eventually.
You eventually free Beluga, and that's the problem.
Right. Yeah. That's another aspect of these games that's kind of interesting, is that part of what you're doing kind of pushes the world into the thing that you have to stop at the very end, right? Like technically, if Soul Blazer had stopped in level 5, King Magritte and all the people of that town are just frozen. They're gone. There's no danger from Deathtoll. But it's freeing all of them. That means that the Soul Blazer has to go fight Deathtoll to end the war, right? In Illusion of Gaia, if Will had never gone to various places, he wouldn't have set in motion the things that required him to head back to the Tower of Babel, right? In this game, similarly, as you do things, you kind of set things in motion, which eventually leads to the final confrontation. Another commonality between these games.
But if you think about it, and here we're posing a question right now that would be, did the Elder have an idea that Ark would go ahead and open that box? That this Ark, who at the beginning of the game was harassing chickens.
Yep.
He was harassing people at the Weavers.
Making a mess, total mess, and he had to go apologize. Did the Elder have a sense that Ark would do this, or is it even further? Did the Elder, who is Dark Gaia, have an understanding that this Ark is the reincarnated hero? I mean,
I don't know.
It's one of those things that's left kind of open, because I think deliberately, because like the duality between dark and light Ark 2 is another thing that kind of gets like the moment where both of them kind of meet each other and one of them comes out. You don't get to see which one it is, if I remember correctly. There's some ambiguity there too. And that's another aspect of TERRANIGMA that's kind of fun and interesting from a story perspective, is ambiguity in things, right? There's a lot of that in this game in particular, which makes it so that you never really quite know whether you're doing the right thing or not, kind of thing. At the very start, the Elder's like, don't go into the basement. And you're like, I'm going to go into the basement. Then you meet this thing, and then you're like, this thing doesn't seem particularly like a good thing. And then it's like, oh, you got to go solve the towers. And then you're talking to these things that are in the towers, and they're like, yeah, what are you sure you do? You know what you're doing, kind of thing. And there's a lot of like questioning yourself in this game in particular.
There's certainly a lot of that. But let's go to the third chapter, where this, at the beginning of it, seemed like a slog. This was by far the longest chapter.
Yeah.
And it involves the resurrection of not just humanity, but who is considered the top scientist is a guy named Beluga.
Yes. So
we see this in Soul Blazer. You had a scientist who was fundamentally good in Dr. Leo.
Yep.
But then you have, in this game, you have a scientist who's fundamentally evil in Beluga.
Yep.
And then we'll get to Granstream Saga. We have Zerous, who he has a light and dark version.
Oh, okay, cool.
But not everyone does.
Right.
Only him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Zerous has a light. Zerous is the scientist in Granstream Saga, but he has a light and dark version, but the other characters don't.
Okay.
So, but anyways, we'll get back to the restoration of humanity.
Yeah.
So as Ark starts freeing humanity, he comes across it's Elle. It looks like her in different clothing. What is this?
Yeah.
Well, then you're thrown into where you have this drifter, which the game calls him Jerk.
Mm-hmm.
They just calls him Jerk. And you'll find out his name's Royd. And later he plays into it up until close to the end.
Yeah.
So, and you're meant to be the one to marry this princess. Well, you find out later, this whole story really shapes things and shapes the game.
Yep.
You find out this is in the French area of Loire.
Yep.
And the king there has this daughter, but it turns out, well, that's not really his daughter.
Right.
She was an orphan taken from a city that the king ordered its inhabitants executed because they knew they were looking for something and the residents would not give it up.
Right.
And so they executed everyone except for this little girl.
Yep.
Well, you find out that the one who the king ordered to execute everyone is this female officer named Fida.
Yep.
And Fida is basically ordered to kill all these people or have herself be killed.
Yep.
Well, Fida then says, well, this little girl I will protect with my life. And later when we get to the airship, she basically does.
Yeah.
So, well, then this Elle, which now we will call Light Elle.
Yeah.
That's the Elle that, again, there's a copy of in the dark world.
Right.
Now, the dark copies do not exist in the same circle of life that the light beings deal with.
Right.
So whereas on the light side you have your birth, death, and rebirth, your Buddhist circle of life. In the dark, the inner world, they don't deal with that.
Right.
And you'll notice there was never any talk of people getting older.
Yeah.
In the
elder
dark
is
world.
Just the elder. He's always been the elder, kind of thing. Yeah.
He's always been the elder. That's right. So,
and the other aspect is that you can see the crystal blue, and people can see the reflections of their light side versions in that crystal blue. Like that's one of the things that's mentioned is like, oh yeah, the crystal blue is very beautiful today. I saw something that looked like it was myself doing something else. So they can kind of get a hint of what the part of them that actually goes through the circle of life is seeing, but they never actually can touch it. If you touch the crystal blue, you die. That's the one thing that they mention in the dark world.
Yes. So, but we're forgetting how Ark comes to start saving the humans.
Right.
He is in a coma. He winds up in Laja of all places. So, again, they're naming everything after Earth cities and continents.
Well, this one is Earth. Like it has the shape of Earth, so it's like, okay, I get it. Illusion of Gaia has a trick behind that, which is why it's not. We won't spoil that, but yeah.
Yes, that's the only thing we won't spoil here. So, but he wakes up after 3 years.
Yes,
and not immediately.
Right.
So, in a way, it's mimicking evolution.
Yeah.
Where animals are supposed to then evolve into humans, where naturally it would make sense for humans to start supplanting nature.
Right. Yeah, you go to all that trouble of evolving and restoring all of the plants and animals in the world, only to be left in a coma when humanity starts to encroach on nature itself. And by the time that you wake up, it's already a fait accompli. So you
Yes.
just kind of have to like deal with it and keep moving forward.
So then he wakes up. You have this wise man, Kumari, who some have speculated that he's a god. I would say he's like an angel,
Yeah,
but he's been reincarnated a few times. And so he already knows. The thing is, Kumari knows what Ark did to save the plants and animals.
Right.
So he's beyond a normal human here.
Right.
But then you have this other man named Meiho and his granddaughter, Mei Lin.
Right.
And we forgot to mention about Turbo. There was a Turbo cameo in Illusion of Gaia in Phrygia.
Right. Yes, that's right.
And as we know, as we're about to say, in Terranigma, Mei Lin has a dog named Turbo. So Turbo is it now? They don't look the same per se, but but the spirit. Well, but that goes to reincarnation. The spirit of Turbo lives on.
Right.
So Mei Lin's shenanigans factor a lot into how this third chapter plays out.
Yes.
It's Mei Lin can conjure mirages and images. And we find this in the zombie town.
Yep.
Where that's her town, and she wanted people to imagine it as she saw it.
Right.
Well, no, it's filled with zombies. But then, did she conjure the zombies later? You know, it's ambiguous.
Yeah.
What is real, or is it just a ghost town that she at first conjured images of a happy town?
Yeah, her family, basically.
Yes. And then afterwards, when Ark goes to sleep, don't ever go to sleep in these games.
Yeah, right?
I mean, don't ever go take a nap at any inn or say, hey, I've got a free bed.
Yeah, right?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. It's not good for you.
Not good. And you wake up and there's zombies.
Yep.
And so, but Mei Lin conjured them. Well, she can also conjure things that have happened.
Right.
So when you do cross the forest and you do make it to that town that was wiped out by the Loire King,
yep,
you find out that, oh, this is what happened to Light Side L's family and everyone in that village.
Yep.
Well, then L sees the truth.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff.
But it gets heavier.
Yeah, right?
Because then L goes, and when FIDA tells you, hey, you need to get L out of here.
Yeah.
You need to take her and you need to leave on this ship now.
Right.
Well, you'll find out later in a letter that she wrote that she left for you because Lightside L, even though you're escorting her, she just ups and leaves.
Mm-hmm.
It says that she killed the king.
Yep.
Lightside L killed the king and got out of there. And that's why FIDA got her out of there. All this for children and teenagers. It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But it gets heavier.
Yeah, of course.
So we look at, and I don't know if we skipped ahead to the mountain goat or not. I mean, I'm thinking when the Eklamata area, and you know what I'm talking about, when Ark, unbeknownst to him, causes an avalanche.
Yeah, yeah.
And this scene is, this scene is one of the heaviest, I think, in almost any game I've ever played.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, Go ahead.
Yeah. So Ark ends up causing an avalanche, and he's in a cave.
Yep.
With a female mountain goat and her male mate.
Yeah.
But then upon inspection, the male is dead.
Right.
Which she calls him her husband. So she realizes that there's not really a way out of here. And since the male is already dead, she says, well, it's natural for me to try to eat him.
Yeah, right.
In order to live.
Right.
And Ark is beside himself. He's like, what are you doing?
Right.
He and she offers some of her now dead husband to him, and Ark's like, no, I can't eat that.
Right.
But it gives a choice. And then eventually, when the mountain goat rams through the north side, but then sees there's a wall that she obviously cannot scale.
Right.
She tells Ark to go ahead, and Ark uses his claws to scale the wall. Well, when you do go back, if you do go back to there, you will see that she perished too.
Oof.
Right beside her husband.
Yep.
And it's very, very powerful stuff here.
And it seems like it wouldn't be, because like the subject matter is so like out there, but at the same time, somehow the game manages to kind of pull you in and make you kind of follow along and feel what they're throwing at you a little bit more strongly than you otherwise might. It's really effective.
Well, in that case, the game has already sucked you in.
Yeah, right.
You're in its orbit now.
But I mean, a lot of people will play a game like that and they won't let themselves experience it, if that makes sense, right? They'll just be like, yeah, I'm gonna take out this dungeon, run around, take the dungeon out, skip all the text. Here we go. And if you do that with these games, you're really missing out.
You really are, and that's there is an Easter egg in Illusion of Gaia. If you beat the male vampire first in the vampire fight, the female vampire says "good riddance" to the male. Yeah, it says,
yeah.
Thank you for getting rid of him.
Right.
So that's a little Easter egg there. So, but remembering where, essentially though, when you get to Beluga, you are rescuing humanity. And at the end, you're rescuing what they considered the genius, the highest example, which is the scientist. Well, it turns out that this scientist was ended up either killed or otherwise suspended because he was working on a virus to kill most of humanity. And then now he calls it by a name Asmodeus, which, biblically would be Ashmodai.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a demon king.
Right.
And there's others that say that he's the demon of lust and so forth. But this virus will kill, we'll say, 90% of humanity. But then the other 10% would be made immortal, but in zombie form.
Yeah.
And Ark, of course, is like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is not
this is not acceptable. And so Beluga tries to kill him with his robots.
Right.
And he's saved in the nick of time by Kumari, by the wise man at Laja, but then he knows what he has to do.
Right.
That there is a prophecy of the golden child, the ultimate rebirth, right?
Yeah.
Let me just move this over so I can. It's the ultimate rebirth is this golden child. Well, how is that going to be affected? How is that going to come about?
Sure.
And well, now we understand that there is a light arc as well, which we have not seen
Right.
at all. You will only see this when you escape the airship. So when you go to when everything happens with Beluga at his lab, well, then you have to find him on his airship.
Right.
So every major character that you've met to that point decides, we will help you. You have the black skateboarder.
Yeah.
You have Mei Lin herself, who says,
Yep.
I'm done being irritating to you, and I know you love Elle and you don't love me and all this, but I'm putting all that aside. I'm going to help you.
Yeah.
Then you have Fida, and then you have the Drifter Royd.
Yep.
And all of them play into how you manage to destroy his airship.
Yep.
Well, in getting off of that airship, a goal saves you, but can only save you.
Yep.
So you're doing this knowing that your friends are going to die.
Yep.
And you leave that airship on that goal knowing that they're all going to die because the airship will crash.
Yep.
And that's heavy stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because it's funny because we've seen the theme of self-sacrifice so much through this series. Then all of a sudden we have the main character winning the fight, but also kind of anti-self-sacrificing himself because the goals will help him, but they won't help anybody else because the funny thing is that even when you can't talk to animals anymore, you can still go back to where the goals are, and it'll just be like, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
Yes.
But you can still use them to fly around the world. And so you can't talk to them anymore, but they still remember you. And so that's another element of it where it's like, but can you help them too? I can't tell you, even if I wanted to tell you that I want you to help them too, I can't say anything. And time is of the essence because the airship's going down and everything. It's a really it's a pretty crazy scene, honestly.
I mean, that lion cub helps you toward the end. The lion cub helps you. You can't talk to him, but he knows that this is Ark.
Right. So
the rebirth happens when the light version of Ark, after the airship deal, and after I believe you go to the South Pole, and you set the star stones.
Yeah, right.
That then you try to go to Hades, but you have to but that's to awaken the golden child in order to do that. Well, in awakening the golden child, what that means is your light self, there we go, your light self, see if it's not blown out. And you, which now you realize you are the dark self.
Yep.
All along, you're the dark self.
Yep.
You merge, and at the behest of light Gaia, I don't think the game says it, but it's implied that light Gaia is making this happen. Well, now we will go back to your childhood sweetheart, Dark Elle, and Dark Yomi. Well, the elder, this is where the elder says, well, it was a little bit before this. The elder says you're no longer needed.
Yeah, right.
And Ark is thinking, what are you talking about? Well, and this is actually before the goal. This is before the golden child. This is before you collect the star stones to awaken the golden child. But the elder then reveals himself to be Dark Gaia. And then he tells you, well, Ark, your services are no longer needed.
Right.
So you can just go die.
Right.
And that's that. And Ark's like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, I wanted to resurrect humanity in order to get to Beluga, I had to resurrect everything.
Right.
And then then Beluga can use his virus and get only the best people, kill off everyone else.
Yep.
And then the best people will be immortal zombies and will serve Dark Gaia.
Yep.
And when Ark realizes this is a shot to the heart here.
Yep.
I mean, this is a plot twist beyond.
Absolutely. It's it's one of those things where you go through the whole game expecting one thing, and then everything gets pulled out from under you all at once, and you're like, whoa, wait, what? Some of it's even a little bit hard to believe, because you're like, no, but I didn't want it to go that way, but here it goes. And yeah, it's crazy.
It's incredible. So then so then with the rebirth of the Golden Child, which is the light arc and the dark arc merging.
Yes.
So then he's a baby.
Yep.
Well, then the baby reappears in the dark world at Krista.
Yep.
And Dark L is there. And what she says is, I was sent to kill a threat to Krista in the dark world.
Right.
And when she realizes it's this child, it harkens back to Dark L's premonition about this.
Yep.
And she says, I will not kill you.
Right.
Well, then it turns out that this is Dark Yomi. Dark Yomi says, well, I've always been working at the behest of Dark Gaia, and so I will kill you.
Right.
Well, then his childhood sweetheart, which is Dark L, sacrifices herself to kill Dark Yomi.
Yep.
So now your childhood sweetheart sacrificed herself.
Yeah, everyone did. Everyone sacrificed themselves for Ark, and man, it's kind of mind-blowing, honestly. It's just like, wait, why would... Oh, wow.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah.
So then, you have the end of the game where now Ark has to go defeat Dark Gaia. I don't think I've missed anything between that scene.
Well, there's that one element where there's that scene where there's a pocket watch, and then there's the 13th hour in the pocket watch. I'm trying to remember exactly what was going on there, but there's all kinds of weird symbolism in this game. It's even where Illusion of Gaia had a lot of interesting symbolism that you can kind of pick at. This one has a lot of ambiguity where you can be like, what exactly did that mean? After all, it's way more. You feel way more in the dark after finishing Terranigma than you do after finishing Illusion of Gaia.
You do. You have a lot more questions.
Yeah.
A lot more maybe philosophical questions. I know I did. I know that's why I have all these notes. But the spirit, okay, but essentially after you defeat Dark Gaia, the spirit tells you now.
Yeah.
The worlds are merging.
Yep.
Which means that all the dark copies will cease to exist once Ark goes to sleep. So again,
don't go to sleep.
Don't go to sleep in these games. I mean, here I'm gonna go like this. And I'm gonna point. Don't go to sleep in these games. So because when Ark goes to sleep, the dark world will cease to exist as it will merge with the surface world.
Yep.
And then at the end, Ark seems reincarnated as a bird.
Yep.
And is flying throughout and is watching not just the plants and animals and not just nature, but also how humanity is developing.
Yep.
And we get a knock at the door at the end, and it's left to our imagination. And this is light. Of course, now it's just L.
Yeah.
It's the remaining L in Stockholm, which is her village.
Yep.
Who's at the door? Now I ask you, sir, do you think it's a bird? Do you think it's Ark in a human form, or the delivery guy?
I I don't know. It's one of those things where I only played Terranigma once, and it was a few years ago. So I'm a little bit hazier on some of the details compared to you because you just played it. Um, but like, yeah, I just remember kind of being like blown away in stages by the ending and how complex while being ambiguous it was. Just really interesting game, especially after I had kind of like like it it's the depth in Terranigma is way better hidden than the depth in Illusion of Gaia is, and so it's one of those things where you actually have to kind of sit back and think about it, and it actually helps to have it be more fresh in your mind because it's way more specific as opposed to Illusion of Gaia where it's a little bit more general and kind of broadly asking questions. Where Terranigma is getting really into like the dynamics of this weird fantasy world that they've generated for the story to take place in.
They have. About the game itself, though, as far as graphics, play mechanics,
Oh yeah,
sound, music, what
I
do you
mean
think?
it's interesting because Illusion of Gaia kind of increased the default size of the sprites a little bit to make
A
them
lot.
pop out a little bit more. Terranigma goes back to the smaller sprites that you kind of got in like the Soul Blazer game, where kind of the standard. I don't know exactly the number of pixels, but I think it's like 32 or something like that. Whereas I think they went to like 48 for Illusion of Gaia or something like that. It's a significant improvement in size. The thing about Terranigma though is that there's a lot more variety in what characters move around and do, and there's the same kind of really good variety in like environments. There's there's the dark world, which has all those very weird surreal visual effects. There's the towers, which have kind of a very ominous, almost demonic architecture to them. There's the barren world. There's the world with plants but no animals. There's the world with animals but no humans. There's the various human cities, each of which has its own kind of feel to it. There's the additional aspect where there's kind of like it's like a semi-optional mini game where you can improve the different human towns, by like carrying an invention from one town to the next kind of thing. There's a lot of depth in there as far as gameplay goes.
There is, but the benefits weren't much to do that as far as increasing the economy of Loire.
Yeah.
And
it's a let's 100% this game kind of thing, where it's like, oh, I got to figure out what they need over here to get this thing, and I have to get dried fish from this other village for whatever reason, and that somehow makes their economy work better.
Yeah, the 10 sardines, and then help this guy make a hamburger. Teach him how to make a hamburger.
There was a photography, like you had to bring a camera or something to one of them. It was weird because again, it's one of those really weird tonal like juxtapositions where the game is really dark, like in general, but like the towns and stuff like that, everybody's kind of happy and they're like, "Hey, help me make a cheeseburger." And it's like, okay.
Well, that is a quote actually from Illusion of Gaia. That is a quote. And it is the spirit in that game said, if the people think they're happy, they'll be happy.
Yeah.
So, but the earth can be sad.
Yeah.
But if the people think they're happy, they'll be happy. So it's about perception.
Yeah.
I forgot that in Illusion of Gaia.
I mean, we spoiled chunks of Illusion of Gaia, and yet we still barely scratched the surface in that game, just like Terranigma. Like some of the boss fights in Terranigma are like these really well orchestrated like procedural fights where you have to figure out the order of operations for things. There's a lot of really cool gameplay in Terranigma. There's a lot of really good music.
Yes.
Nice graphics, good graphic effects that weren't present in like Illusion of Gaia, and just overall kind of that imagination feel to it that these games have. That there's that weird. It's very spiritual in the same way that the other two games are.
Oh, very spiritual. I think it's. But the difficulty, there's some swings in it, and
Yes.
you could you can get destroyed by a boss 1 minute, but if you gain one level, that may make all the difference.
And not just that, but you can kind of just like grind levels if you feel like you need it in this game. You can't do that in Soul Blazer because the number of enemies is generally limited. And Illusion of Gaia, you can't grind enemies either because once you beat the area full of enemies, you get like a jewel, and that levels you up, but you can't repeat that process in the same area ever again.
Right.
This one, if you feel like you're underpowered, you can always go to a dungeon and level up, which makes the game more accessible for people at different skill levels. That's just a different system to play with.
It does, and it doesn't really hamper it.
No.
And again, the music's incredible.
Yep.
Especially, I have to tell you, even just the beginning and later scenes where L at the end, before you take that last nap in bed.
Yep.
Just the way that theme is kind of interpolated from the beginning, the musical play is tremendous. Absolutely. It really is. Could not be happier with it. Now I got to tell you about a game that I'm not sure if you played but it's made, Quintet ended up shutting down.
Right.
And all the top guys went and formed a company called Shade.
Yes.
And Shade developed a game, and it was released. I forgot who released it in Japan, but in America, it was released by the same people that did the wrestling games. That's right. THQ.
Oh, THQ. What a
toy
bizarre
headquarters.
Company. THQ also was responsible for the port of Dungeon Master to the Super Nintendo.
Was it them or FCI or no FCI?
No, FCI did the Ultima series. THQ was the Dungeon Master port to the Super Nintendo. I remember this because I called THQ when I was a kid because I bought a copy of Dungeon Master used. Have you ever played Dungeon Master?
I've played it a little bit. I never got into it.
It has a rune-based magic system where each spell consists of several runes, and you don't know what those runes are without a manual. And so I bought a used copy of Dungeon Master and couldn't get anywhere in it. So I went, 10-year-old, 12-year-old me, whatever, got so frustrated that I called THQ to see if they had like a way that I could like mail in, $5 and have them send me another manual or something.
Did they?
No, they never. They answered the phone and they humored me a little bit, but we never received anything from them.
Oh, come on. See that?
Yeah.
See now where's the customer service even back then?
Yeah, right. I mean, I was asking them for a manual for a game that they released, 4 years ago. It was a shot in the dark, but it was the only way that I could think of in pre-internet days to make that game playable. Nowadays you can go look up the actual manual online, but back then it was not easy to do that.
So the thing with the Granstream Saga, it is by all accounts, I consider it a quintet game.
Yeah.
It is, the plot devices are not only similar.
I played it for about half an hour because you mentioned it to me. I did not know about Granstream Saga being Quintet alumni made. Like, this is one of those things, the PS1 era, all these companies were in flux. And so you never knew like who went where and who did what, unless you were really into like the details. And so right. And there were a million crappy JRPGs on the PS1 as well. And so Granstream Saga was one of the ones that I didn't ever play once at all, ever, until like 3 days ago when you mentioned it to me. And so, it's interesting to see a lot of the same themes. And they had a really good budget for Granstream Saga too, honestly. They had those animated cutscenes at the beginning that were pretty well made.
And listen, that's not the only animated cutscene.
Yeah.
So in playing through that game,
Yeah.
there might be 30 of them.
Oh wow, really?
Yes, really. I mean,
That's crazy.
There are a lot of animated cutscenes. So the game came out in Japan in 1997.
Yeah.
In America in 1998.
Okay.
So let's think of the timeline.
Yep.
And let's think about the games that were released, like Final Fantasy VII.
Yep.
Okay. The Granstream Saga, what people will look at first and foremost is the 3D characters. They don't have faces.
Yep. Very weird design choice.
Very weird. And I almost think they didn't know how to make realistic looking faces.
Or textures or something. They
Or
just didn't
textures.
know. Yeah.
And instead, that's where they went all anime.
Right.
And really overdid the animated sequences, which are very good.
Yeah.
I liked them, actually.
No, I think
thought it was a welcome change.
There were a lot. So there were quite a few PlayStation 1 games that did the animated cutscenes. A lot of them didn't do them very well. They kind of cheaped out on them. There were a few games that did them for like intro and outro, right? Like Wild Arms is an example of that.
Yes, yes.
Wild Arms had a very beautifully drawn animated intro, but it didn't have any other animated cutscenes throughout the game. We had a lot. We now had voices in games, which was a new thing for console games. And so we had cases where companies tried to cut corners a lot on either the quality of their voice actors or on how much they use them. If you ever played Xenogears, right? Xenogears is a fantastic game.
Oh, yeah.
PS1. But if you watch the animated cutscenes in Xenogears, you will notice that they are switching between the Japanese voice actors and English voice actors, where the Japanese voice actors will do like the oofs and the heys and stuff like that. And then the English voice actor is only in there for when they're actually speaking. I still remember the first time I beat Xenogears, there's this scene where Bartholomew is running towards the camera, and he doesn't like yell, hey, or hold on, or whatever. He yells, oi!
Like, oh, come on.
That's the Japanese voice. They didn't even cut that out. And then he walks up and now he's talking English again. Stuff like that. So these ones, I watched the first ones in Granstream Saga, and they were well made. They were well animated. They were colorful. They had good shading, which was commonly like a sticking point in the production of these things. And the English voice acting was actually pretty good. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it's very well done. And
then you had cutscenes like the CGI cutscenes in Dragon Warrior 7, which were like nightmare fuel.
You know what? Am I going to have to bust out my castanets here?
Oh man.
Am I going to have to do it?
It sounds like you might. Oh man.
I don't know.
There was, yeah.
Now you know the yes, I got to do a little bit of it. It's been a while since I played with my castanets, but
yeah.
And again, the professional ones, you have they're sized appropriately, they're sticklers on size. So, you have to hold them where they're hanging like this.
Right.
I know there you go. And then you notice one is slightly bigger than the other.
Right.
And one is the bass and the other's the treble.
Right.
So
well, there was a scene. There was a dancer in Dragon Warrior 7, right? Where she had some castanets, I think.
Yeah.
Listen. And then they tried to take your Kuriyama.
And it's going to be on.
Oh man.
So anyways, yeah, Dragon Warrior 7 CG cutscenes, brutal, dude.
Brutal, absolutely
brutal.
So like compared to that, Granstream Saga is golden,
So in getting to it, though,
Yeah.
It turned off some people who wanted the graphics of Final Fantasy VII,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have that. But what it does have, again, is the story.
Yeah.
So this game is not just about reincarnation, but it's more about sacrifice than even Terranigma was.
Wow. Okay.
So here's, you wake up and you don't know where you're from. Again, it's kind of the orphan deal.
Yeah.
But you have this scepter. Now, the idea that it's a cane, that's not what the scepter means.
Yeah.
The scepter is something on your arm, and it can replicate
like a bracer.
things.
Yeah,
it's a bracer, yes. It's a bracer that can replicate things.
Or it's not even quite replicate things, right? It's like takes the spirit of a thing that once was and rebuilds it from scratch, kind of thing.
And
like,
that, yes.
Yeah, it does that too. Because that's what it does in the first part of the game. You go into this first dungeon and it's like you like touch some scrap metal and it turns into armor around you, and you're like, what? And like the guy that you're with is like, where did you get that armor? And you're like, I don't know, it just kind of materialized. Let's keep moving.
And that happens throughout the game. In fact, you get some of the best armor that way, where there'll be a herald up on a wall, and you go up and use your bracer, your scepter, as they say, and you will incarnate it. Yeah,
right.
So you have that. The guy who you call your father. He goes to the wise men's temple and he ends up dead. You don't know exactly why yet, but what your world is, the world consists of 4 continents,
floating continents
and they're floating.
Yeah.
And what the idea is, you have to save the continents.
Right.
So you save when you get off of your tower. There's a floating tower called Heirloom.
Yeah.
And I almost liken it to a light Gaia, or like maybe a being just below light Gaia.
Sure.
It is something that helps you in your quest. And at the end of the game, in order to defeat what the major enemy, which is called Mao, Mahoh.
That's probably evil king, basically.
Yes.
In Japanese, yeah.
Yes. But I liken that to Dark Gaia also.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Heirloom, at the end of the game, your floating tower that you use to go between the continents ends up crashing at the South Pole.
Oh, okay.
Into the water.
Yeah.
Which basically causes a hole to go to the dark world.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And
that's novel.
Yes. And that's how you end up going after this entity called Damar, which is Dark Gaia, in my opinion.
Okay,
so
sure.
In getting to that, though, you come across this angelic girl named Arsha, and then a piratess, a female pirate named Laramie, who has a spirit bird, which he hates being called a bird, named Corky.
Okay.
And then you have some other supporting characters. Now, others have claimed that, this is ripping off of Ease. No, I don't think. No, it's not ripping off of Ease.
Doesn't sound like it.
It doesn't sound like it at all. Yes, the hero has red hair. That's it.
I mean, in the version I played, his hair was even closer to pink than red, honestly.
Yes.
Like Adol Kristen is like ruby red hair, you know?
Yeah, it's fire red. Yeah,
fire red. And like, I mean, I didn't get that feeling at all when I was looking at the main character in Granstream Saga at all. I mean, I guess I didn't get very far in it, but he doesn't feel like an Adol Kristen character either. Adol Kristen,
he's not.
he's an adventurer. That's kind of his thing. He's like the only adventurer in the world, right? Yeah,
Right.
and Dogi is kind of like along for the ride, right? But
And so they tried to liken another character to Dogi.
Yeah.
His name is Gandor.
Yeah.
But he only busted through a wall once.
Well,
whereas that's Dogi's thing, is
Yeah.
busting through walls and doing stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, but the main character in Granstream Saga is not an adventurer. He's just like, he's got this
Correct.
scepter for no really compelling reason, and he was just living his happy life with the guy that he thought was kind of his foster father, and then he gets thrown into this adventure. He didn't look for the adventure; the adventure found him. That's very different from these series.
Yes, I you know what? I am glad I'm talking to you tonight, because you know what? Don't go on these Game Facts message boards. Don't go on these Reddit, cesspools.
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going to see all this drivel about Eon being just like Adol Christin, when Adol Christin, all he is an adventurer. And when any female or whatnot wants him to settle down, he says, no, I have to seek adventure.
Yes.
That's what he does. Well, that's not what Eon does. And we're talking about that. So each of these continents they have an orb that helps them float.
Yeah.
Well, the evil army, which is called the Imperial Wizardry,
yes,
is after all the orbs. Well, at the beginning of the game, they have 3 of the 4.
Yeah.
Well, in the course of the game, you will get the other 3.
Right.
But let's get to the second orb.
Well, before we do that, I just thought it would be worth just mentioning really quickly that there's a very practical feel to the start of Granstream Saga, because the first thing that happens is that you and your foster father, I'm sorry, I don't have the characters' names memorized, but
Valos, Valos.
Okay, so it's Eon and Valos, I think, something like that?
Yes, Eon and Valos.
The first thing you get is a scene where Valos basically lifts a crystal up above his head, and he literally slices off a chunk of the continent. And so these continents have been kind of sinking slowly over the years. The wise men are missing, and nobody knows how to recharge the orbs. And so these continents have been kind of falling and falling. And their solution, which is an extremely hilariously practical thing to do, is we're just going to slice off some of the continent so that it's lighter and it doesn't fall as fast. And so that's how the game starts. Is that he slices off a little piece of the continent, and Eon runs out to grab a bird's nest that's on the part that's falling, grab it, get it back so that the birds don't get killed. And that's just a really nice, it's a fun and imaginative and practical entrance to this very fantastic world.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up. That is, because in order to first raise the each continent, what happens is Arsha has to call the lifting spell. Well, you have to know what that lifting spell is, and in your quests in each continent, until the last one, of course, is figure out the lifting spell and then have Arsha recite it.
Right.
And that recharges the orbs, and that lifts each successive continent up. So you have each of these things, but in lieu of that, all you can do is slice off chunks of the continent to try to lighten its load, because it is, as the orbs get weaker and weaker, the continents start to drift, and then they will eventually hit the ocean.
Right.
So, yes, getting to the plot lines in this game, I gotta tell you, so the water world, which is the Aquos, that's your second world.
Right.
Now we're talking about cults, but we go beyond Kefka's cult, right? In Final Fantasy VI. Yeah. So, you want to talk about the slave trade? You want to talk about
God.
sacrificing your own son?
Oh my God, really?
Yes. So what happens is, well, she wasn't successful in sacrificing him.
But she wasn't the first one to try.
No.
So
No.
you have the whole history behind it. That's like, oh crap.
Well, so they go to this water world,
Yeah.
and it's the Aquos is its name, and a boy says, "Oh, you're not from here. Hey, why don't you stay at my house?" Okay. Well, it turns out that the boy's mother is this cult leader.
Yep.
And half of the town supports her, and the other half thinks she's full of it.
Okay.
So now you're in a party where it's you as Eon, then you have Arsha, who represents really, really purity and innocence, but also naivete. Okay.
And also kind of the magic that can save the world. She's the one that needs to recite the spells.
Yes, only she can.
Right.
So, and then you have the pirate girl who I guess there's a trope in Japanese anime called a tsundere.
Yes.
And that's kind of the aloof girl that eventually warms up to you.
Yeah, that's right.
Something like that. So, well, that's Laramie to a T.
Okay.
And so you have and the little spirit bird who later in the game won't be little anymore.
Right.
But they go to this, they're in this town, the boy welcomes them in, the boy's mother's this cult leader. Well, they decide they're going to go to a cult meeting. When they start hearing the mother's sermon, and the mother, despite her not having a face, she looks good. Yeah, despite the cult leader, despite her not having a face, because they don't have faces in this game.
Yeah.
She looks pretty good, I have to admit. So, but when she starts giving her sermon, Arsha stands up and says, "What you're saying is full of lies." Arsha points and says, "You're full of lies. You're not telling the truth."
Wow.
Well, you know what happens next. They all get thrown in jail.
Yeah.
And then, well, then come to find out, they're really about trying to get everyone thrown in jail because it's free labor.
Oh, geez, man.
Slave labor. Yes.
Oh, wow. I can't believe they did it again.
It's slave labor again. So then they're trying to figure out what to do with Arsha. Well, this cult leader, we'll see her for a while. She her goal, she thinks, is to worship this false god who really is just another monster.
Okay.
But she's wanting the people there to support this god. Well, you end up defeating him in order to lift the Fire Continent.
Okay.
Or you end up defeating this false god to lift the continent. So, but in getting to that point, the boy's mother, her name is Selela, Selela. Selela actually says, "It would be great if I sacrificed my own son."
Jeez.
So now she's working on behalf of the Imperial Wizardry. Remember, they have the 3 other orbs.
Yep.
Well, they want to keep possession of these orbs.
Sure, yeah.
So in order to do that, well, they have to try to control this population. So she had some Imperial wizard or sorcerer go and throw the boy off the roof of the building.
Jeez.
Well, it turns out that there was some mysterious magic light because the boy is a descendant of one of the 4 wise men. There we go. And so Arsha is a descendant of one of the wise men.
Right.
And then the boy is a descendant also. So in other words, the boy's mother is a cult leader, but the boy's father was a wise man.
Okay.
who perished.
Yeah.
So the boy's magic saved him from being killed. He, however, is in a coma.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Well, then in defeating the false god, they then wake up the boy's mother. The boy's mother goes and is all sorrowful, and well, spoiler alert, at the end of the game, you find the boy's mother, this cult leader's spirit, talking to you.
Oh, wow.
So it implies that she killed herself.
Jeez. Wow.
So
that's heavy stuff.
It's
That's Quintet, man. Jeez.
Rudy, it gets heavier, dude.
Yeah.
It gets heavier. So, okay.
Boy. Okay.
Well, in this case, literally. So the next one at the Fire Continent, it seems that there are 2 towns, right?
Okay.
And the weight has to be equal in the 2 towns.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, it will tip over and the volcano will spew lava.
Okay.
So there's a volcano that spews lava if the balance is not exact. Well, of course, the Imperial Army decides we're going to shoot a torpedo in the volcano and we're going to cause it to erupt anyways.
Okay.
So that's what happens. And then here's what you do know about the Fire World, though it's more toward the end of it.
Okay.
Fire World is called Volcas. So volcano.
Yeah.
Then you add OS and all that. So Volcas. So that's where you get the scientist.
Okay.
The scientist's name is Zerous.
Okay.
Well, the first Zerous you meet is the light Zerous. In this game, it's the only example of a light dark.
Okay.
Everything else is reincarnated, or and I'll get to the reincarnation. I'm saving it. I'm trying to save it here. I'm trying to have the hook going.
We gotta,
But the scientist, there's a light Zerous, Ziruas, and then there's a dark Zerous.
Okay.
So the light Zerous wanted, his ideas was to create things to help people. And he started on creating an ultimate life force. So you know where this is going.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. That's.
But then the light Zerous realized that this could fall into nefarious hands,
right?
And so he stopped working on it.
Okay.
But his dark side, dark Zerous, continued.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so dark Zerous's goal is to create the ultimate life force that's immortal, but it looks like an alien.
Yeah.
And there's a scene. Okay, the enemies. When you get to the end of this fire stage, this stalagmite castle, it's a castle that's turned on its side. So you get the wild visual. It's kind of like, do you remember Castlevania 4 for Super Nintendo, where they rotated the stage and then you
had to hang off of the things? Yeah.
And you're letting the stage rotate around you?
Yes.
Okay. Well, here the stage doesn't rotate continuously, but it's as if you're walking in a castle on its side.
Okay.
So imagine the building.
Yeah. There have been games that have done kind of things like that before. There's a survival adventure game for the Super Nintendo that was kind of like sort of based on the Poseidon Adventure, and it takes place in an upside down ship.
Come on, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a thing. I can't remember the title of the game, but that was a thing for the Super Nintendo. It was one of those
all you had to say was Poseidon Adventure, and I'm thinking, what am I getting myself into?
Well, I mean,
I love Leslie Nielsen and all, but
I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know that they were inspired by like the story or the tone of the Poseidon Adventure, but like
Yeah.
I think the game was called SOS. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think you're right. You're right. Yeah.
And it takes place in an upside down ship that's sinking, and you're trying to get out and help other people get out and kind of stuff like that. So we have the upside down castle in Symphony of the Night.
So okay, so
there are things that are really comfortable to walk on that become very uncomfortable to navigate when they're upside down or on their side, I guess is the lesson to be learned.
well, and it is a lesson when you get to this part.
Yeah.
After you basically complete this castle, you have the end area.
Mm-hmm.
You drop down below,
Mm-hmm.
and you're basically in a living body.
Ooh, that's
You're
weird.
walking
Okay.
through the intestines of this ultimate life force.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's attached to this castle.
Wow.
And it's all red.
And yeah.
It's the most red I've seen in a game in a long time.
Okay. Interesting.
And you have to use sulfuric acid to dissolve through the muscle wall in order to continue through the game.
Yeah. Like there was a moment like that in TERRANIGMA where you had to like know a certain thing about chemistry in order to complete some little side quest in one of the cities or something. So yeah, that's weird, but on brand, I guess.
It is, and you go through, and there are enemies. So you've never played Final Fantasy Legend 2 / Saga 2, but I'll tell you that there's a place where one of your helper friends, this priestess named Key.
Okay.
You have to go into her body to defeat all the viruses.
Oh, I saw that in Nintendo Power. There was a hey, Final Fantasy Legend 2, here's how to beat this part of the game. I remember that part. Yeah, okay.
Yes, so the enemies kind of look like
similar
that.
in Breath of Fire 2, actually, as well.
Okay, yeah. Enemies kind of look like this.
Yeah.
The enemies, it is surreal. Well,
yeah, I'll bet.
When you're traversing through here, when you get to the end, you face the ultimate life force, Dark Zerous.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, the only way to defeat it is Light Zerous has to sacrifice himself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To end, because as long as the light Zerous is alive, you cannot defeat the dark Zerous. So when you do defeat this ultimate life force, and Zerous is you then go to the fourth continent, where you have this massive bird, who oversees everything.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you have to undergo trials. Well, your little bird, the little bird that has been with you,
Corky, right?
Corky, eventually merges into this giant bird.
Giant bird, of course. Well, of course, the small bird merges into the giant bird. This is a quintet game.
Yes. Yes. So you have that too. I mean, and so I'm just thinking there is a scene in this game, where I got to tell you, in order to complete the trial and of that continent, you're made to go through the cemeteries of not just the royal family who's dead, but the helpers.
Oh, wow.
Soldiers.
Yeah.
And then the public cemetery.
Oh my God.
And then your goal is to find you're supposed to locate a girl with her mother.
Right.
And eventually find out which one is the correct woman.
Right.
Who is this girl's mother, in order to proceed. That was a little bit maddening.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And so again, enemy combat is one-on-one. You're not you can't just go smash a bunch of enemies and then every enemy can block.
Yeah.
And it's irritating when the last boss blocks your biggest spells.
Yeah.
So after all of this, and you then you end up completing the trial.
Yeah.
You then, your floating tower ends up going to Hades, submerging itself.
Right.
You then get to pick, and I know I'm skipping a couple parts here as far as the Imperial
wizard, whatever.
Yeah, because so in the fourth one, right?
Yeah.
I will say this. The Imperial wizardry is your main antagonist.
Sure.
Well, the hero only thinks that if you defeat this Imperial wizard, that's it.
Right.
And the head of it is Gudel Zephyr is his name.
Okay.
And well, come to find out, it's not. When you do defeat Gudel Zephyr, you realize that no, this is not it.
Yeah.
You have this.
It can't be that simple, right?
It can't be that simple. No, you have to defeat the latest incarnation of the Mao, who his name is Damar. I liken him to Dark Gaia. You have to defeat him.
Okay.
So in doing so, when you get there, the other spirits, including that cult leader, which implies suicide from her, but that Valo speaks to you.
Yeah.
Other wise men who have all perished,
right,
speak to you. Well, then you have to make a choice, and I'm skipping over some minor characters because they're not that important. You have to make a choice. Now, you are with Arsha and Laramie. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, as Corky is, into the large bird Karok, Karok now. You have to make a choice in order to defeat the last Mao.
Yeah.
In order for your bracer, your scepter, to have the power to do so, you have to kill or sacrifice someone you love.
Oh, wow.
And you have to choose. Who will you sacrifice, Arsha or Laramie?
Dang.
Yes. And there's no, oh no, I can reincarnate the other later in the game. No.
Nope. Oof.
No, this is final. This is final, dude. So I know with Arsha being already of the pure and spirit, when I went through the game, I sacrificed her. So now here's the major plot device.
Okay.
In the game, which is reincarnation.
Yeah.
But who is Eon? It turns out Eon is the darkest of nights in the past life.
Oh, okay.
Eon was a warrior named Zeruge.
Okay.
And Zeruge lost his kingdom in battle. And then he decided, he got in a rage, and he managed to summon Mao and did work at his behest.
Okay. Yeah.
And started slaughtering everyone.
Wow.
And then in the cemetery that we visited earlier,
right,
there are many of the people who Eon slaughtered in a previous life.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Jeez.
Now we're getting,
that hits hard. Wow.
But then he comes across a girl that he couldn't kill. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't.
Okay.
And that girl is I think Elamira.
Okay.
Was the girl. Well, Elamira became reincarnated into Arsha.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So the Princess Elamira is the one who stopped Zeruge from killing everybody.
Yeah.
And then Zeruge ended up killing himself.
Right. Jeez.
So that same demonic warrior ended up being reincarnated into Eon, which is why he has the bracer.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
That's why he has the bracer. Yes.
Okay.
And Arsha is Elamira, the purity, the force of purity that caused him to stop killing everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So knowing that,
yeah,
and then the last boss, the Dark Gaia idea, he even says, "Hey, I know you were me in a previous life, like you were my station. You were a previous Mao.
Yeah.
Before you got killed. So before you killed yourself. So why don't you work with me?"
Yeah.
So Dark Gaia, the last Mao, Damar, is telling him, "Hey, just work with me. Just kill you and work with me."
Right.
And it'll be like old times.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. So
man, I'm gonna have to play that game. Jeez, that's crazy.
So he doesn't do that. You can choose either to sacrifice Laramie.
Yeah.
If you sacrifice Laramie and defeat the last boss, you two will be reincarnated again as Zeruge and Elamira, but but just that's what your names are. And Zeruge is just a soldier now, and Elamira is just some girl.
Okay.
And they meet up.
Okay.
But they don't remember really.
Yeah, it's the same kind of, that's very Quintet.
And then, so if you're like me and then you sacrifice Arsha.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, Eon and Laramie, they go their separate ways for like a year.
Yeah.
And then they end up getting together.
Okay.
And that's how that ends. But it's Eon and Laramie. They don't show them being reincarnated.
Yeah.
But they do show, if you sacrifice Laramie, that Eon's reincarnated back in the Zeruge, but as just a soldier.
Yeah, like
and Arsha reincarnated into Elamira as just a girl as opposed to a princess. So
like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes kind of thing.
Yes, that is perfect. So essentially the game is okay. I think the game's mechanics, the blocking, I know it's interesting. It could get irritating.
Yeah, I'll bet.
It can. There are a couple like weapons that can break the game though. So
okay, that's good.
I didn't use them, but
sure.
But you could really break the game. But that's good if you don't want to deal with the humdrum.
Yeah. You just want to get through and see the story and
Yes, so that's the thing to look at. If you just want to enjoy the story, but you don't want to. The grinding is difficult in the game because of the load time, and you only fight one enemy, and then everything's a drawn out battle.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that could get kind of irritating. The game is underrated. It didn't get much play because THQ published it here. And they gave it an ugly cover.
Yeah.
They should have used the Japanese cover for the game and just put English text, but just made it the same font. It had like kind of an old English Gothic font.
Yeah.
The Granstream Saga.
The title screen of the American version has the Japanese text for Granstream Saga on it.
Right.
It says Granstream Densetsu, Granstream Legend.
Right. And so why not just use that for the cover?
Yeah, but they didn't. Of course not.
They
should have got the Mega Man 2 cover for the American Mega Man 2 cover.
Oh, is that horrible? Oh my. I mean, it never is. I mean, you're pulling out all the hits today. I mean, some brutal covers. What other brutal game covers can you think of? I mean, there are some.
Oh man, Legend of the White Lion.
Oh, that's bad.
The one where like they took the like Japanese kind of anime girl cover and they turned it into like what's her name, Debbie Lautner or something, one of the like the with the leg warmers, very like 80s fashion kind of thing with the big hair.
Oh my gosh.
Stuff like that.
Horrible.
That's one that always bugged me. For a game that sucked too. Terrible balance. Legend of the Ghost Lion. Good luck.
Yeah,
Good luck ever finishing that game.
And the thing is, the lion's not a ghost. It's a white lion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I got to the point where we were talking about the white lion. I just remember the combat being you have to summon things, and eventually the enemies get strong enough that they can one-shot all your summons. So every turn is, I summon you, you get killed. I summon you, you get killed. I summon you, you get killed. I don't have anything else to summon, I get killed. That's the way that game ended for me.
That's bad.
It was bad.
That's bad. Now there's a certain mutual friend of ours,
yes,
who owns a Japanese Famicom copy of this game.
Okay.
And I think we need to run it. What do you think? Man. Or is that bad?
It's long is the thing. Like we could, but we would have to, like, it is long and dull and you can soft lock yourself. There's a point in the game where you go into a town and they're like, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you go into a town and they're like, hey, it's like 100 gold coins for a passage on the ship. And then the ship takes you somewhere and it's one way. And you're just like, oh, I'm screwed, aren't I? Oh, okay. And you don't, you can't gain levels. You have to find items to level yourself up. So
that's brutal. Oh.
I mean, I have a copy of it. I can record some of that and we can talk over it at some point because it's horrible.
We have to. That's actually picture perfect for this. This is what it's meant for. It's not meant to play good games.
Right.
I mean, it's meant to play the atrocities that are inflicted.
It tried to be a Dragon Quest clone and it failed in every conceivable way. I don't know why we're talking about Legend of the Ghost Lion. I guess we're just talking about bad covers.
So there's an archetype, and I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah.
But there's a guy named Joseph Campbell who got a lot of play.
Yes.
And George Lucas, of course, swears to his altar.
Yes.
Regarding the 17-step hero's journey.
Yep.
Archetype.
Yes.
And I was going through it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to see. I'm not a supporter of the theory because,
I mean, it's a way to make a story. It's a template. That doesn't mean that every story is that. You know what I mean? Like, people do this thing where they kind of they zoom out and they see things that kind of look similar. And so then they assume that they're the same because they look similar when you zoom out. And, you can easily miss some trees for a forest that way. And, yeah.
There's a lot of source selection bias, I think.
Yes, there's that too.
Where if you find things to confirm your theory as opposed to looking at it with a broader view and seeing, is my theory actually correct?
Or you do things where you end up in kind of a circular situation where you make a definition of a genre and then you complain that all the instances of this genre contain the elements that define the genre, right? It's like people complain that a lot of epic pastoral fantasy is like Lord of the Rings. Well, part of being an epic pastoral fantasy is that you have, the elements of setting that Lord of the Rings has, right? That it's part of the definition. It's like complaining that there's technology in a science fiction story, right? Well, of course, there's technology in a science fiction story. It's a science fiction story. That's the point.
Yes.
Where that can be one of the things where if you really dig into some of these genre definitions, a lot of the things that people complain are tropes because they're part of the definition, or at least very close to it. So I don't know. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine.
It is, and going through these, because I was trying to see where the quintet games match up, which of the 17 that they adhere to, and of course
Sure.
which they don't. And since we've done such an exhaustive review of it, I'm not going through the entirety of them again. But
Sure.
But I will say, and I'll just run through the 17 steps. A couple of these I'm laughing at.
Okay.
A couple of these, I think people have to remember with modern eyes that Campbell came up with this in 1949.
Yeah.
And that, he's a big James Joyce guy. So, he did a lot. Yeah. So he did a lot of he loved Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake was like his favorite book.
That's already disqualifying.
Yeah. So there you go. So already from the jump, he is, banned. So
yeah, right. Oh man. Okay.
So,
Let's go through
that's
these.
what we're dealing with. So when people talk about, he doesn't include women and it's not feminist and it's 1949. I mean, what do you expect?
Sure.
So anyway, first is the call to adventure.
Okay.
There's a call for the hero to initiate a quest.
Okay.
But then that hero at first is like, no, I don't know if I can do this. That's the initial refusal of the call, step 2.
Okay.
But then there's a supernatural aid to help you on your quest.
All right.
So for TERRANIGMA, you've got the call to adventure. That Ark is inquisitive and wants to see what's in the box.
Yeah.
And then there's a refusal of the call. Oh, I don't know if I can do this. I open this box. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But then what's in the box is Yomi, Dark Yomi.
Yes.
Who, and then the elder agrees to help him on this quest.
Right.
Of course, he doesn't realize that he's being used as a pawn.
Right.
Well, then he crosses the first threshold of adventure.
Yep.
Meaning he takes that first step outside of Krista and goes to the first tower.
Yep.
Well, then, of course, Campbell gets away with this by saying, well, not all of these has to be in order.
Well, if we meta-ize every element of a story and then say that they don't even have to be in the same order, that makes it even easier to fit this framework around any story that someone has written. I mean, if we think about Soul Blazer, the main character, the player character, is not even a human. There is no refusal. The player character is an instrument of God's will.
Yes.
So he doesn't refuse, and there's not even really a call to adventure. He doesn't have any sort of agency in that sense. God literally says, "You go do this," and he's like, "I can't even speak, so here I go."
Right. So you have the belly of the whale, and that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Campbell calls it the belly of the whale. So, yeah, I know. Then we go to the road of trials. Mm-hmm. And of course, in games, you have trials. That's part of every
part
adventure.
Of the nature of a game is that it has challenges to it.
So then you have
let's be honest, doing anything worthwhile has challenges to it.
Yes.
So this is a case of the thing that we're talking about is part of the definition, and therefore it's not really interesting to highlight the tautology of this thing's in the definition. There's nothing there. Yeah.
I mean, Rudy, you are poking holes. You're like the size of Swiss cheese in this thing. So let's continue, which I'm glad, because in going through this, I about crumpled this paper up.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah.
I thought, so then there's a meeting with the goddess, but now the goddess doesn't have to be a woman.
And it doesn't have to be an actual goddess.
Correct. Correct. And it's a final test to win love or companionship.
Okay.
I
mean, there's an interesting dichotomy there, right? Like, if we think about George Lucas, right? We think Star Wars, and we think the difference in how Luke and how Han both react to Leia, right? So this is one of them chooses companionship. You know, we find out later that it's because of relation, like you know, being like genetically related, and then the other one chooses, you know, love eventually, but you know, there's some bumps in the road, of course.
Right. Then you have woman or other as temptress. And the goal is to keep the hero in the temporal plane,
Yes.
as opposed to aspiring to spiritual or otherwise higher goals.
Okay, yeah.
Well, then there's something that I named one of my backyard wrestling events. Don't ask me why, but I named it apotheos or apotheosis.
Okay. I've heard the word before, but I don't really know what it means.
It's loosely translated as a blaze of glory.
Okay.
But of course, I don't think he knows the meaning of the word, because
maybe
he says that in this case, the hero understands that he is divine.
Okay.
That there's something about the hero that is manifest.
The blaze of the divine, maybe, or something like that. Yeah, okay. I mean, you know, there. So I guess you could probably kind of qualify this under like chosen one syndrome in a sense too, right? Like the hero is the chosen one for some reason. There's something special about him, right? We can expand it that way. You know, again, we don't have that in Soul Blazer, because the main character is not a human. The main character doesn't have that kind of arc until he himself reincarnates based on his own kind of unspoken wish, right?
Right. That the master, that God allows him to become human.
Right. Finally, after all of his trials are done.
Yes. So, and then we could talk about that at the end, but then you have step 11, which is you achieve the ultimate goal.
Okay, that's only 11 of 17. That makes sense.
Correct. So then you
be in the same order, so it's fine.
So then after you achieve this goal,
yes,
there's a refusal to return to the temporal world. Okay,
the temptation of remaining among the divine. I can kind of see that, sure.
So it's obvious that he just took a lot of Greek mythological stories.
Well, I mean, these are important stories, and it is important to analyze these stories. But at the same time, if you zoom out that far, eventually all the details go away, and the details are more important than, you know, a Campbell or a Joyce care to admit.
Correct. And we continue. So there is a magic escape, step 13.
Okay.
Then there's a what he calls rescue from without, which is meaning that you need help in order to facilitate said escape. So like in
help comes from an unexpected place or something like that.
Well, in TERRANIGMA on Beluga's airship, right?
Yeah, right.
That Gaul, who normally can't fly that high, somehow magically is able to carry just arc.
Just you, yeah.
Yes. So we could say that. Then you cross the return threshold, meaning you won't ever go back to the divine.
Right.
One could say that in Soul Blazer, it's when Blazer wants to be human.
Yeah, sure. That's a good example.
Step 16, you're the master of the two worlds. And here, Campbell, here Campbell decides, I'm going to read Friedrich Nietzsche, but read him incorrectly.
Oh, no.
And he comes up with this notion of the cosmic dancer.
Okay, I've never heard of this before.
And now I only heard about it in a Mark Bolan T-Rex song.
Okay.
I was dancing till I was 12. Oh, I don't want I don't want YouTube to demonetize this thing. So anyways, yeah. So anyway, so the cosmic dancer is this figure that somehow dances between both the divine and the temporal.
Okay.
It is basically a free individual that's free to do whatever he or she wants to do.
Okay, kind of like a self-fulfillment kind of thing, maybe, or something like that.
It's an affirmation of life. It's a self-fulfillment. And then step 17, you have the freedom to live in the moment.
Okay.
And so in TERRANIGMA, L, I forget. It was I think it was Dark L that said, happiness is when you can loaf about and not have to worry. I'm paraphrasing, but
yeah, sure.
But that's when you have true happiness, is when you could spend a day to just do nothing.
Yeah.
And be happy.
Yeah.
So that's what Campbell Soup decides to give us here. And, he got on all like 60 Minutes and all this and all Nightline, I'm sure, and all these shows.
Right.
And George Lucas got so enamored with him. He did several specials with Campbell. And then there's a Joseph Campbell Foundation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the main criticism is, and you might remember this.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a certain teacher of psychology that we had together in high school who insisted that it was not Carl Jung, but instead it was Carl Jung. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. And he rode my ass about it and says, "Oh, no, you're mispronouncing it." I go, "No, I'm not. Number one, no, I'm not.
Number one,
I'm looking at a Britannica right here that says it."
Yeah.
And number two, if I'm writing stuff about the collective unconscious, what does it matter
if I pronounce his name right?
Which I pronounced it right.
Yeah, right.
And he still rode my behind about it. And so, what an idiot. But here's the thing, is Campbell basically appropriates Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche and then creates this massive 17-step thing that you could fit almost everything in, because remember, you don't have to do all 17.
Right, and they don't have to be in order, and they don't have to, it doesn't have to be this one's male and this one's female, and the goddess doesn't have to be divine, actually. And divine can be a metaphor in general. That's, it's people that want to elevate themselves over other storytellers by pretending that the details don't make a thing creative. And, I think it was... Tolstoy who said that, there are three types of stories. A man does something at home, a man goes somewhere, or a man comes somewhere from somewhere else. It's like, well, yes, that's how movement works. Like, yes.
And there he has reduced he has reduced storytelling to probably its ultimate, right?
Yeah.
So in looking through this, because others have tried to mention that the Quintet games are all perfect examples of this hero's journey. No, they're not. That's why you don't read GameFAQs message boards or Reddit cesspools.
You can read yourself into things however you want, but there's enough differences that there's enough leeway in the so-called hero's journey that you can't let it be meaningless. Like, it has to mean something. And there's enough differences between, the quintet stuff and, even a fairly broad look at the hero's journey that they're clearly doing something a little bit different.
They are. But so to wrap up about the Quintet games, the 4 that we just talked about. What is your lasting impression? I know Illusion of Gaia has one on you, but your lasting impression overall of the Quintet games on you as a gamer, on you as a human being.
I mean, as a gamer, they are wonderful examples of how a complex package can have a simple veneer. You have a top-down adventure game with very basic combat, and yet at the same time you have some of the most well-told and interesting stories in gaming history. I feel like ENIX, or rather Quintet, made some minor and consistent advances in the gameplay in all of them. They were consistently good on art design. They were consistently good on music. And I think like the storytelling is what really gets me, because there's just nobody else that tries to tell this kind of story. And it's the kind of thing that if there were other storytellers, I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, this game just too much focus on story and weird story stuff. And I want to get in and tap the A button repeatedly. And like there's something else special in the Quintet games. In all of them too. Like, we didn't talk much about ActRaiser, but ActRaiser is a fine game, and ActRaiser 2 is super difficult action game, but very good art design and stuff like that. We didn't talk about Robotrek. Maybe we'll make that another episode some other time. But Robotrek was a what would you call it even? A sci-fi parody comedy game that is just like really kind of a neat little experiment. And, it was nice to see that the Quintet people, even though Quintet had closed, they all kind of found their own way together to someplace else to create another masterpiece game with a crazy story. And, it's just nice to see these guys actually accomplish these things even beyond, even after Quintet had to be reincarnated into, what was the company that they turned themselves into? Shade. So there we go.
So, and then looking at the other Quintet developed games, so you brought up Robotrek, and then of course, ActRaiser and ActRaiser 2.
Yeah.
And then what is this? I guess they developed a game for Saturn.
Oh, really?
Yeah, let's see. Let me get a hold on.
Solo Crisis or Code R? That's what I'm seeing.
So Planet Laika.
Oh. Huh.
And then they developed Godzilla Generations for Dreamcast.
Yep.
And then one of the Simple 1500 Yen series.
Yeah.
For PlayStation. But yes, they developed Solo Crisis, Code R.
They worked on Shenmue.
And then they did part with Shenmue, where they helped Sega AM2 with it. And Magical Hoshin, which that's a Koei game, so
Mystic Heroes in the US apparently.
Yeah. On
Never
Game
played
Boy
it.
Advance.
And there was a PS2 version as well that Quintet didn't work on. I don't know. I mean, I think that they were given some opportunities where they got some funding, and they didn't have to worry about making something that was like, something that people would love to, that millions of people would love to play. I think that sometimes they got an opportunity to tell a really weird story, and they fortunately did a very good job when they were offered that opportunity.
So I guess Solo Crisis is almost like another ActRaiser game.
Okay, interesting.
That is interesting. I honestly never heard of it.
No, me neither. I mean, when they kind of like, I guess technically they still were quintet at Granstream Saga, because Granstream Saga was 97, and they were back as quintet in 98 for Solar Crisis and Code R for Saturn. I don't know. The Japanese Saturn is a weird system because it failed so hard in the US and it succeeded so amazingly in Japan. That might be something worth talking about at some point. So
I think it would. And Code R is half. Get your steering wheel out for this one.
Oh no.
But only for half of it.
Oh no.
Because it's half racing game.
What?
Half dating simulation.
Oh no. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, look, to be fair, one of my favorite series has a similar structure. I don't know if you've ever played any of the Sakura Wars games.
I have.
But it is half turn-based strategy for the most part, half visual novel / dating sim. And it is one of my favorite series because of the way that it has the most absurd possible world, but they play it perfectly straight.
They play it all straight. I remember, Sakura Taisen on, they had, I think, 1 and 2 on Saturn.
And then 3 and 4 on Dreamcast. And 5 was on Dreamcast, but never made it. But 5 was the only one that made it to the US, and it made the PS2 port did. So, and then there was Shin Sakura Wars, which came out for PS4 a couple of years ago.
Okay. No, great game. Interesting game. I wish I knew more at the time.
They are some of the most laugh out loud, hilarious visual novel elements that I've ever seen anywhere. Like genuinely, like I don't even understand. I can only read some Japanese, and I still was laughing out loud at this game playing it because the jokes were so good. Just to give one example, in Sakura Wars 2, there's some new additions, and they both come from the European branch of the Teikoku Kagekidan, or the Kagekidan group. That's they fight in these giant robots. And one of them, her name is Orihime, and she's very like haughty and arrogant. And at one point, they're talking about the next play that they're going to do. They kind of do like musicalized versions of plays as like their day job, and then they fight robots. They fight monsters and giant robots at night. It's again a bizarre setting, but they play it straight. And they're setting up for their next show, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to do King Lear." And
come on,
and they say, "Oh man, but the problem with King Lear is that it's just so depressing. Maybe we should do a King Lear with a good happy ending instead." And Orihime is like, "Put a happy ending on King Lear? Are you insane?"
That's funny.
I lost my.
That's funny.
Oh wow! It's even funnier than that because it turns out that King Lear was written at a time where it was written in an interim where a king had just died. And so they actually, in real life history, put a happy ending on King Lear for a period of time because the king didn't want people to look like negatively upon himself. And so he required that they took the tragic ending off of King Lear and put a happy ending on for a certain period of time, and then later on it was reprinted and redone with the proper ending. So not only did they make this joke with perfect timing, it was beautiful timing. It's just like the look on Orihime's face. She's like super like European chauvinistic as well, and she's like, "You are ruining a thing that you have no right to ruin." Just laughed.
I love it. I love it.
There's a great part near the end of the fifth one where you do a toast. And the cool thing about Sakura Wars is that instead of just having like some things for you to choose of like what your response is to a thing, like it'll be timed. And so things will appear and disappear as the timer goes down as well. to kind of represent you kind of like biting your tongue or like being unsure what to say. And so like the good thing, the clever thing vanishes, 1/3 of the way through the timer. And so if you don't read fast enough, you're just like, oh, I lost that option. I got to pick from these two now. But they also did things like choosing how strongly to do a thing. And at one point in 5, you do a toast. And they give you the thing to figure out how hard you're going to do the toast.
No.
And I went all the way to the top, and the main character takes his glass and lifts it up and literally smashes it against someone else's glass, creating this massive explosion of champagne, mess on the floor, broken glass everywhere, and everybody just looks at him like, what the hell do you think you're doing?
Right.
It's so good. Oh, fantastic series.
I love that. That's great. One day I will have to go back through those, and
they're incredibly fun.
It honestly, it sounds like it. And then the last one, there's a game on PS1 called Brightest. I'm seeing what that is.
Man, it doesn't even have a Wikipedia entry.
Yeah, it says, well, Hardcore Gaming 101 has an entry on it. I don't know. They're a site that I followed. I mean, we're talking over a decade ago, but and then there's Quintet reorganized, but Shade still existed.
Yeah.
So Quintet and Shade came up with this game called Brightest.
Yeah.
And so you are
action role-playing game published by Sony.
I don't know. I mean, looks kind of like Kingsfield to me, and that's
a little bit. Well, yeah, I don't know.
So we'll see about that. We'll see about that one. But there's some others like that. That one on Saturn, Solo Crisis. That one might be interesting. I will have to look at that and dig out. I don't have my Saturn anymore, so it was one of those JVC, or it was the V Saturn. I don't have that anymore. Look, I don't need to play video CDs anymore.
Right.
You remember that? Oh my goodness. So, but I'll see what I can do. See how Solo Crisis is.
Yeah.
And we can go from there. But to wrap it up, so do you think what do the Quintet games mean to you as well, not just as a gamer, but as a human?
I mean, it was a story that I had never heard told before, and something that was handed to me at the age of 9 or 10 or something like that. That kind of made me think about things that no game really tried to do. It's just like, oh, you mean in order to get this thing, I have to hand this person over to this other person? That's a rather interesting design choice. Usually they have me doing the good things in games to get rewarded. Just the fact that it made it through the censorship of Nintendo of America. Like every time I go back and play Illusion of Gaia, I think about that and I'm like, man, how lucky was I that this made it through and I got to play it when I was a kid, as opposed to, maybe playing the Japanese version later on emulation or whatever. Soul Blazer is so simple and pure and fun that like you can just go back to it and you can just enjoy all the little touches. In the second level where you're restoring all the animals, there's birds and they don't just stand still. They like go up and fly away, and then you have to wait for them to come back so you can talk to them again and stuff. TERRANIGMA I came to a much later, but like it still has one of those really bizarre, interesting, twisty stories with the same weird thematic elements that made the earlier games really pop out at me. So it's just one of my really formative memories as a reader, more than even necessarily a gamer. Just like This is doing things that other media that's targeted at me doesn't dare do, and
Right.
you know, I have to respect them for that.
Yeah. And I can tell you, so I only owned Soul Blazer.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know how things would have turned out different if, as a young teenager or, you know, older child, I had Illusion of Gaia. I don't know.
It's a game that tries to teach empathy, which is like something that most games don't bother with.
They don't. They don't, and they went out of their way to try to teach empathy, and that's commendable. I have to
Yeah, I
give
think so too.
you know, to give my hat to them. Maybe these games should hire outside writers, maybe, to come up with stories, because that Illusion of Gaia is the result of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of how the industry currently is. You know, there can be times where the people who are in the companies are doing the good stuff. They're consistent, right? There can be times where the people who are outside of the industry are just trying to get in to parasitize off of things. We see that a lot with games these days and how they're written, right? You know, you look at your Dragon Age, whatever it was called, and stuff like that. And, you know, the writers drove it into the ground because they were more interested in like getting a message across,
Right,
and actually making an interesting story that was nuanced, right? There's no nuance in any of these new games that are coming out that are written that way. And nuance is something that, even if you want to push people in a certain direction, right? Like ideologically, you can't do it by simply saying, this is the best part of the thing that I like, and I ignore all the possible downsides and all the possible questions that you might have, and I just say, this is the good. You have to show someone what you think is the good and why it's the good, and you have to convince them. You can't just, you know, assume your conclusion and reason from there. You have to make the effort to convince people, and that's harder than simply writing something that follows all of your own particular like ideological preferences.
It, in a way, it insults the intelligence of the gamer to not include said nuance.
Yeah,
And,
there's an element to that for sure.
And that to just beat someone over the head with a straightforward plot, or the other way, a complete lack of plot.
Yep.
And you're not giving the gamer something to sink his or her teeth into. And that's where, for me, Soul Blazer had that. I'm sure Illusion of Gaia, of course, it has it now. But if I had it as a kid, that and TERRANIGMA would have been the same thing.
Yeah.
And then I would have been able to handle something like Granstream Saga, which, honestly, those themes, I mean, they are darker. I think it got a teen rating.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no blood in the game or anything, but there's
but like, you know, it's, those rating systems are goofy anyway. They've always have been. So what do you say?
But with that said, I thank you, sir, for coming on.
Absolutely.
This has
is
been a
super
wonderful experience. And,
Same here.
And I hope this is the first of many episodes to come right here.
I mean, we can find weird gaming stuff to talk about. And I mean, okay, so a little bit of background for the audience. I originally pitched talking about the Quintet games as a 10-minute segment in a 1-hour podcast. And here we are at 3 hours and 55 minutes. So, you know, we will have plenty of opportunities, I think, to come up with weird and strange game-related things and really dig into them and talk about them, and hopefully provide something that other people will find interesting to listen to.
Absolutely. And I know that together we can provide that to you. And so I bid everyone a great evening or morning, whenever you choose to listen to this. And I thank you for listening. And, if you like it, hit the like button. If you'd like to subscribe and see what more there is to come. Why am I keep doing this like I'm on a treadmill with arms?
Stairmaster.
like I'm on a Stairmaster like this. I'm getting my exercise now. Hit, ding the bell, the subscribe bell. And I
Get
thank
those
you
notifications
again.
and you'll see more from us.
Absolutely. You take care.
Have a good one, everybody.